Hi everyone, good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
Mom, I'm not marrying him. Amanda screamed. She was getting hysterical. Daughter, look at the family he comes from. He will carry you in his arms, and his parents will shower him with money. I don't want his money, and I don't want his hands. Amanda cried. And why were you born so stubborn? The woman went into the kitchen. She started rattling something, and Amanda was sitting on a chair in the hallway. The girl had just come back from the street, where she had been walking with her group, including Billy. Mom, she peeped into the kitchen. What do you want? The woman didn't turn to her. I'm only 18 years old. Why are you so eager to get rid of me? Amanda said sadly, and sat down on a stool. Who told you that I want to get rid of you? On the contrary, I want to make you better, sighed the woman and sat down opposite her daughter. I can tell you're going to marry me off to the first guy you meet. The girl wanted to cry. Tell me, how long have you been friends? Her mother sat closer to her. Who cares? We've been in the same company for 5 years, and I don't like him at all. You're the one who thought I should be with him. Amanda didn't want to talk about it at all. Well, look at your girlfriends. Wanda's going to marry Tony, Natalie and Nanny will marry soon, and you'll be a girl. Her mother got up again and went to the stove. Alexandra raised her daughter alone. She also had a difficult fate, which she did not like to remember very much. When she was young, she fell madly in love with a young man. At that moment, he was just leaving for the army. Victor, I'll be waiting for you. Young Alexandra shouted to him, but he just waved goodbye. After that, there was a long correspondence in which Alexandra told how much she loved her Victor, and he wrote meager and rare letters about how he was doing well and about the weather. Victor returned. They began to be friends with Alexandra and soon got married. But their marriage did not last very long because Alexandra became pregnant and gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. And 3 months later, she died of pneumonia. That's it, Alexandra. We have to get a divorce, Victor told her years later. Why are you leaving me? It's hard enough already, and now this. She was crying. I can't live with that on my mind. I don't love you. I have someone else. And he just packed his bag and left. At that moment, it seemed to Alexandra that life was over. She wanted nothing more. And at that moment, Mickey appeared on her way. He groomed the girl, gave her flowers, said compliments. When in a couple of months, Alexandra realized that she was pregnant again, she agreed to Mickey's proposal and married him. By then, Alexandra was in her 30s. That's when Amanda was born. When the girl was 2 years old, there was an accident at the factory where Mickey worked, and the man died. Alexandra decided for herself that she would not marry again, and it was too late to have children. She devoted herself to raising her daughter. Who's my real daddy? Amanda once asked Alexandra. What kind of questions? If you are Amanda, who, then, is your real father? Glared her mother at her. Today at school, a girl told me my dad adopted me. She didn't make eye contact with the woman. What are you talking about? The birth certificate says I'm the mother. He's the father. What else do you want? The woman didn't understand her. She didn't understand what kind of conversation her daughter was having. But it also says on the birth certificate that it's a duplicate. Amanda parried her. I'm telling you again, your father's name was Mickey, and I don't want to hear any more questions like that, as your mother cut her off. When Amanda was in 8th grade, they moved to a new apartment, and at that very moment, she had a new group of friends. They all walked together in the yard, and it just so happened that there was one more boy than the other. Everyone else was in pairs, but Billy was alone. Amanda, shall we go for a walk? He called out to her. We go out as it is. The girl was proud and self-sufficient. No, the two of us, called her Billy. He did come from a good family. His mother and father were in good positions, and they had a big apartment of their own, but none of that appealed to the girl. But her mom was very attracted to it. She realized that Billy, if he got her daughter and she agreed, it would be a very profitable option. "Why do you keep chasing him away?" Alexandra said to her daughter when she saw Billy walking alone from the driveway again. "Here you need, you drink with him, tea, coffee, eat cakes," her daughter told her. "Oh look, don't regret it," her mother told her. "About what? This?" She nodded at the window. "Well, tell me, who are you considering for a husband?" her mom asked her. Did she have to get married right away? Amanda didn't understand her. She had just started school and had been studying for 6 months, and she didn't think she had to get married right away. "I believe that if you have found a favorable guy, you get married, parents will help with the apartment, children will be born, and here is a family has taken place, a cell of society, consider," admonished her Alexandra. At some point, mother and daughter argued so much that Amanda couldn't bear to be at home anymore. She went out to the courtyard, where, as usual, there was her company. It was close to summer, so everyone was already lightly dressed, laughing. It was nice. "What's mother again?" asked Wanda, who was best friends with Amanda. "Billy's been bothering me." She turned and glanced at the boy with a sidelong glance. "Come on, it's really okay. Quiet guy, parents have everything. What else is there to have in life?" My friend was on Amanda's mom's side. "I don't love him, don't you understand?" The girl wanted to cry, now in front of her friends. At that moment Billy came up. Immediately all the tears disappeared, her head was up. She didn't want to look like a sissy in front of him. "Amanda, why don't you come over to my place tonight?" Billy called out to her. "There's more." She turned away. "What if we all go together?" Sveta asked him. "All right, let's go together." The young man didn't mind. The whole group piled into Billy's room that evening. They were laughing loudly, talking about something, telling stories, and Tony pulled a flat flask from his inside pocket. "What have you got there?" Everyone surprised. He put his finger to his lips. The young man unscrewed the iron lid and gave Billy a sniff. What's that?" "My dad makes it himself. Today I poured a little bit of it out for sampling." The boy called everyone to try the homemade alcoholic beverage. He took a sip himself, then handed it to Billy. He wouldn't take it, but the girls agreed. When the flask was emptied, cheeks flushed, the conversation became more cheerful. At that moment, my mother came into the room. "What's that smell in here, guys?" she asked. "We don't know." They made silly faces, and after that opened the window for some air, sat on. "That's it, I guess it's time to go home." Wanda got up. "I'll walk her out," went Tony after her. It appeared that only Amanda and Billy were left in the room. "I'm going home too," headed for the exit. "Wait, I'm with you," walked Billy after her. They went outside. Billy took her to the driveway, as usual, and there Amanda remembered that she'd had a fight with her mom this afternoon. "Why don't you invite me over for tea?" Millie asked. "Let's go," she agreed. She didn't know whether it was Tony's flask or the fact that she'd had enough of everyone talking about it. "Oh, Billy, come in quickly." Alexandra was happy to see the guest. Of course, how could Billy not? Amanda said to the side, and kicked off her shoes. They went into the kitchen, sat talking about something. "I want to ask your daughter to marry me, but she won't agree," the guy complained to the woman. "I know how many times I told her to accept your offer, but there is no use," sighed Alexandra. "Why not? I agree," the girl said immediately. "What?" the mother and Billy said in a chorus, and turned to her. "And why are you so surprised? One offered, the other persuaded, and now both do not understand what is happening." The girl looked at them defiantly. "Love, I'll be by your side all my life, and I'll always carry you in my arms." The guy hugged her and kissed her. "Oh, come on, that's enough." The woman separated them. Alexandra already had an idea of what to buy and how much money would be spent on the wedding. And then there were negotiations with the young man's parents. They pooled their money, bought food, alcohol, rented a restaurant, and everything else. That's how Amanda became Billy's wife. In the opinion of all other people, the young man was very quiet, calm, ready to do anything for his wife. But in reality, things turned out to be not so fun. At first, the young people began to live at Billy's parents' house. Amanda was not very comfortable there, but she just kept quiet. 4 months later, when Amanda became pregnant, she told Billy that she had to move away from her parents. "Let's wait until the birth. While the baby is small, Mom can help," he told her. "Okay, but promise me we'll definitely move later," she asked him. "I promise," the young man replied. By this time, his father had arranged for him to work at the factory and said that by the time the child was a little older, a room in the dormitory would definitely be available. The pregnancy went well, and when Amanda began to feel ill one night, an ambulance was called. She was taken to the local maternity hospital. While the girl was pregnant, she was frightened by the fact that labor could last several hours. It would be very painful. They said other things, but in fact everything went not so terrible. A couple of hours, and on the girl's chest lay her baby girl. Emma, she stroked her little head. "That's it, Mommy. We are taking the baby away from you, and you go to the ward. Soon you will bring your treasure for feeding," the nurse told her then. Billy only found out that he had become a father in the morning. Together with his friends and girlfriends, they walked to the maternity hospital. They congratulated him for a long time, shouted some words, and then they all went to the nearby woods to celebrate. By the time Amanda was discharged from the hospital with the baby, her mother-in-law had already prepared everything. There was a crib in their room. "Sarah, will you help me? Teach me how to swaddle the baby. Show me how to bathe," asked Amanda to her mother-in-law. "Of course, my dear. I will help you in everything you need," the woman agreed with her. Emma wasn't even a year old when the young family moved into the dormitory. The father-in-law had indeed done what he had promised, but from that moment on everything went wrong. "Where have you been again today?" Amanda asked Billy, who had come in late from work again. "Yes, with friends to hang out with," he said, and the wife heard her husband under the fly again. "Well, you didn't act like this before," she told him. "Oh, that's it." He waved her off, turned on the TV, and lay back on the couch. At first, Amanda didn't tell anyone anything. She swallowed her husband's insults, his antics, his late comings home, and everything else. "Billy, tomorrow is Emma's first day of kindergarten. Mom promised to help, but you shouldn't stay away," she told her husband. "Look, it's your woman's business. That's what you do," he said, and went to work. Alexandra helped her daughter and granddaughter in everything. She had a heart for her. When Amanda went to work, all of Emma's care now fell on her grandmother's shoulders. She raised her, you could say. Grandma picked her up after kindergarten. Grandma took care of her in the evening, and she spent the whole weekend at her grandmother's house. "Billy, we've been invited to a birthday party tomorrow. We should go together," Amanda told him already at home. "Do you have to?" "I don't want to go out with your friends at all," he told her back. "Why am I always alone everywhere?" She didn't understand. "Okay, I'll go with you. Just for a couple hours," was Billy disgruntled again. It wasn't uncommon lately. He would come home from work dissatisfied and go to work dissatisfied. "Hi." They came to visit Amanda's friends, sat down at the table, started sampling salads, drinking, talking. At one point, Billy abruptly got up from the table. "What are you doing?" His spouse looked at him. "That's it, we've had enough," he said gruffly and headed for the exit. "Well, sit for another hour, and then we'll go together," Amanda coaxed him. "I told you back home that I was only here for a couple hours." He was very nervous. Amanda realized she had a difficult conversation waiting for her at home. But when she got home, the difficult conversation turned into a very unpleasant fight. It wasn't the first time Billy had hit Amanda. She was sitting in the kitchen crying to her dorm roommate. "Oh, don't mind him. Everyone lives like that nowadays," she told her. "Good thing Emma is at her grandmother's and doesn't see all this," continued the girls crying. After that moment, the quiet Billy felt like the master of the world. His world was a small dorm room with his wife and daughter. He could come home drunk, and if he didn't like it, Amanda would get hers. Emma huddled in a corner, crying, scared. When the girl went to the first grade, everything was still handled by her grandmother. Alexandra picked her up in the morning, took her to school, took her home after school, met her, and took her to her house. So far, she had no idea how her daughter lived, and she was afraid to complain to her mother and kept silent. "Emma, why are your eyes red? Didn't you get enough sleep?" her grandmother asked her one morning. "No," she replied. "Why?" The woman couldn't understand. "Daddy was bouncing around the room half the night again," the girl said quietly. "What do you mean, bouncing around the room?" Grandma didn't understand. "Bah, don't scold your mom. She didn't want to tell you this." Emma told her everything that goes on at their house at night. "God, what's happening?" Alexandra was horrified then. Of course, she didn't want to talk about it in front of Billy, so she didn't take her granddaughter home that evening, but waited for her mother to come for her. "Why didn't you bring her tonight?" Amanda asked. She was more afraid that now they would arrive late, and Billy would start the concert again. "I wanted to talk to you about your husband," her mom told her honestly. "Emma told you everything?" Amanda guessed. "Yeah, why didn't you tell me that? I was wondering about the woman." "Mom, I could not have done it, not married him, not had children with him and not lived with him. But if I did, why should I regret it now?" At that moment she was dressing her daughter, and they were about to go out. "If it gets bad, come to me. There's always enough room for everyone," Alexandra told her. When Emma was 10 years old, on a day off, she and her mom went shopping, and as they were coming home, the girl stopped by the driveway and looked at her mom. "Tell me, why don't you leave him?" she asked her. "My girl, it's very difficult," her mother simply replied to her then. "You realize that it's not only you who suffer, but also me." By then Emma was very afraid of her father. She never told him anything, never approached him, never spoke to him. "We have to be a little patient." At that moment Amanda knew what she was talking about, because Billy's parents had promised to buy them an apartment, and it had already been picked out. And indeed, not 6 months later, the family moved into an apartment. Billy promised his wife that he would get coded, and he did. But he only lasted a year. But speaking of that year, it went perfectly for the whole family. Dad didn't drink, Amanda stopped staying late at work, and Emma started sleeping over at her grandmother's house less often. Did you lose it? Amanda came home one day to find her husband lying on the couch, breathing heavily, with an empty bottle on the table in the kitchen. "Leave me alone," he said roughly. You could see that he felt bad. Emma was horrified when she came home from school and saw the same picture. She told her parents she was going to her grandmother's house for the night, and she did go there. And it started all over again. As soon as Amanda was late for work, even for an hour, it meant another concert at home tonight. "Grandma, can I come and live with you?" Emma asked her. She couldn't be in this situation anymore. Yes, of course, the woman agreed with her and told her daughter so. Emma went to live with her grandmother. It was paradise. In the morning, she woke her up for school, prepared breakfast. They ate pancakes, cheesecakes, pancakes, drank tea, told each other something funny. After the girl went to school, she brought good grades. With her grandmother, they did their homework. And when Emma moved to 7th grade, it was here that a turning point seemed to happen to her. In the winter, she met some girls who were older than her and started hanging out with them. One day they offered to taste wine. "Why, I'm small," Emma said to them. She took the bottle and took a sip from the neck. "So, how are you? Are you okay?" her older friend asked. It's okay, the girl gestured. Now she realized that going to her grandmother was no longer an option, so she moved home again. What have you been drinking? Her mother asked her when she came home from a disco. Yeah, beer, a little bit, the one admitted to her. Emma, you're just a little girl. My mother didn't understand. But when her father came home, he was sitting somewhere with his friends again. Everyone was away from his daughter. They had their own problems. Then Emma tried smoking, too. And when she got to 8th grade, her grades slipped. You realize you're 14 years old, and you're already acting like this. Her mother reprimanded her at home. Aha, the girl moved back. She just wanted to go to bed, not listen to these lectures. Emma didn't forget about her grandmother. She spent her weekends at her place. Everything was fine here, as always. Grandma gave her money. Emma said it was for ice cream, but she spent it on something else. Naturally, Alexandra did not guess anything. She loved her granddaughter very much. Her mother was worried about her daughter. Where have you been again? Look at the time. You have school tomorrow, Amanda told her. Oh, Mom, leave me alone. I'm going to your school, walked to her room the girl. So, if at least once you don't wake up in the morning on demand or bring bad grades, then no more discos, no more girlfriends, no more friends. My mother gave me an ultimatum. Okay, Emma promised her. And indeed, every morning she woke up like a soldier, got dressed and went to school. Yes, her grades were bad, but they were C's, and her mother didn't scold her for them. One day, Alexandra got so bad that she scared everyone. Then an ambulance was called and she was taken to the hospital. It was her heart. Doctor, how is she? Amanda asked. Soon she'll be discharged. Everything will be fine. But from now on, she didn't want any emotions. Not the happy ones, and especially not the bad ones, the doctor told her. I hear you, Amanda nodded. And, since her grandmother checked her granddaughter's diary at the end of each week, Amanda had to make a second diary. Now her daughter brought C's from school, but in that diary, which was made for her grandmother, Amanda gave her completely different grades and signed for her teachers. And they showed it to her grandmother, who was only happy for her granddaughter that she was doing so well. Emma grew up. Her antics got worse and worse. She was afraid of her mother, and if she had to ask for something, she asked her grandmother for it and lied to her. The girl was finishing 10th grade and met a young man. Did you start being friends with a guy? Her mother asked her at home. Yes, she answered her. So tell me, Amanda wanted to know what her daughter was doing. His name is Carlo. He lives in the same town. Her daughter reluctantly began to tell her. Then it turns out that this same Carlo is 7 years older than Emma, and he's doing some not-so-legal things. I will not allow you to socialize with this young man, Amanda told her at home. Who's going to ask you? Her daughter didn't understand. What do you mean, who's going to ask? I'm still your mother, and you're underage, she shouted at her. Well, what are you going to do to me? Emma told her cheekily. Come on, keep talking to him, and you'll see what I'll do, Amanda said threateningly. When it was time to enroll, Carlo himself drove his girlfriend to another city to check into a dorm and did the rest. Closer to winter, a terrible incident occurred, terrible for Emma. Carlo came to see her almost every day. They met, talked, walked around the city. Sometimes he rented a room in a hotel where they spent the night, and then the guy disappeared. He was gone for almost a week. Emma was worried, but she couldn't ask anyone or consult anyone. Emma, there's someone there to see you, came running into the room. The girl realized that no one could come to her besides Carlo, so she got very excited and quickly went downstairs to the watch. It was indeed him, but not alone, but with a friend. Hi, can I crash at your dorm? The guy asked then. Of course, the girl knew that they could pay the commandant money for the dormitory, and they could stay here even overnight. They gave the money for 3 days, went to her room. Everything was fine. In the morning, the girls went to study. When they came back, they cooked lunch and fed the guys. "Man, it's great that you've got us here." Carlo said some strange words, as if he had nowhere else to live. "It's fine," Emma answered them. And then, one day, I heard some noise and shouting in the corridor of the dormitory. A man in a black jacket, hat and pants ran into the room where Emma lived. He had a machine gun in his hands. It was really scary. The girls were immediately taken out of the room. In the corridor, Emma saw her mother, who took them to another room. "Mom, what's going on here?" Emma didn't understand. What, forbidding her mother to be friends with this guy, was the reason her mother had done this. It was the late 90s, and it was to be expected. "And I told you not to go out with him," Amanda began to reprimand her. "And what, all this just because I'm dating him?" The girl didn't understand. The other guys in the dormitory hid in their rooms, and everything seemed wild to them. Carlo and his friend were taken away. Emma cried. "Why are you crying?" "I told him not to come within a meter of you anymore," the woman said. "Mom, but I love him," my daughter said through her tears. "I get it, but not this time, not in this lifetime." The woman was impenetrable. After her mother left, Emma was comforted by her friends. "What do you think?" her roommate asked her. "I don't think Carlo gives a shit what she says, and he's coming to see me again tomorrow." The girl looked at her. "And he came to her when she was in class. He called her out of his office." "Carlo," she hugged him. "Emma, we need to break up," he told her. Those words cut the girl so hard. She knew he had listened to her mother. That's why he was telling her this now. "Well, fuck you." She pushed him away from her. She didn't go back to class, but ran to the dormitory. She had to do something to keep her mind off it. It turned out that Carlo and his friend had borrowed money at interest from the local authorities. They had nothing to pay back, so they were looking for them. They hid somewhere for a week, and then decided to come to Emma's dorm. Those who were looking for them went to Amanda's mother, who told them they could find them at her daughter's. That was good for her. 2 or 3 months passed. Emma was home for the weekend. She still loved Carlo, only communicating with her grandmother. Of course, there was a lot she wasn't telling her. And then she met him again on the street. The girl was walking her dog in the yard at the time. "Hi," he walked up to her. "Hi." She was shaking all over. She couldn't just talk to him. "Will you come with us?" he asked her. "I will," she replied, but to do that she needed to go home and change. "Where are you going?" her mother asked her as Emma picked up her coat. "I'm going for a walk," she answered her. "With who?" her mother questioned her. "What do you care?" The daughter wanted to open the doors, but her mother grabbed her sleeve. "Come on, let go." Her daughter didn't understand. "If you go with him now, I'll curse you for life," said mother to Emma. "I'm going anyway." She snatched up her coat sleeve. "You're a fool," her mother shouted after her. "I wish you were dead," her daughter shouted back at her. She hated her parents. Her father was always drinking and beating her mother, and she stood up for her. And the mother had no business with her. She could only threaten her and forbid her to do anything. The girl pushed the door of the entrance with exasperation and ran out. Carlo was waiting for her in the street. She told him everything. He took pity on her, of course. Afterward, the young couple went to visit mutual friends. They went to his place after going to visit him. Now the girl was meeting him secretly. She would go to her studies on Monday, return to her town on Friday. Carlo would meet her. They would drive to his place, and on Saturday early in the morning, she would go home, telling her mother she had just arrived. And just like that on Sunday, she would leave home to catch the train, but she wouldn't go to her studies. She would go to Carlo's house, and on Monday morning, he would take her to where she was studying. Alexandra, naturally, knew nothing about all these situations. She also idolized her granddaughter, sending her money. When Emma came to her on weekends, she gave her everything the girl asked for. Emma, in return, helped her in the vegetable garden and around the house. Everything was fine with her grandmother. One summer day, Emma noticed that she was a few days late. She went to Carlo and told him about her suspicions about the pregnancy. He was confused, which pleased Emma, too. "You're so old, you're a grown man. You can't make up your mind. Either take responsibility for me and for your future child, or think about what we're going to do. You can't tell your mother about it," the girl told him. "If I told you that we were going to have an abortion, would you take offense?" "That's a direct indication that you love me," the girl grinned bitterly. And then he arranged for some doctor to take Emma there. She had an abortion, but in a small town, you can't keep a secret. Quickly home, the daughter's mother called. Now, she knew that her mother's tone did not bode well. When Emma walked in, she was immediately slapped in the face. "What are you doing?" the woman asked her. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Emma was afraid that if she said it herself, she might give her mother the wrong information. "Wanda called me today and told me you were at their place, yelling your mother at her." Wanda was her friend who worked as a midwife and sat in the gynecologist's office. "And that, in general, it's confidential information. She couldn't tell you." Emma understood everything already. "I don't understand you. What are you doing? What's wrong with your brains?" Sat down on the chair and cried, "Mom, what's wrong with your brain?" Emma asked her. "I'm just fine with my brain." Amanda continued to cry. "Yes, I see how good it is. When you were a teenager you married that idiot who beats you all your life, and you live and endure," the daughter said about her father. "So, what? And what do you care?" Mom wiped away her tears. "And you think that when I saw all this when I was a kid and worried about you, it didn't affect my nervous system?" It was the girl's turn to cry. Not a word to grandmother. Her mother looked at her. Naturally, Emma knew this without her. In the summer, the girl also spent a lot of time at her grandmother's house because she really felt more comfortable here. "Baba, give me money for ice cream," Emma said as she left for a walk. "A simple one?" the woman asked. "No, on the popsicles. They really did cost twice as much." It was enough money for her and her friends to go out and buy what they wanted. Grandma gave everything, indulged her granddaughter. Even if she and Carlo had to spend the night, she let them stay over and didn't say anything to her mother. Emma started school again and moved away. Carlo visited her less and less often. She realized that their relationship would soon fade away. "Mom, hi, what's up?" Amanda came to visit Alexandra one day. "Everything's fine. Why do you ask?" Grandma was making dumplings in the kitchen. "Look, I came to you to talk to you about Emma." Amanda had been preparing for this conversation for a long time, and now she was ready to tell her mother everything. What happened to her? She didn't understand. "Look, we've kept a lot of things from you since you got to the hospital." And she sat there and dripped valerian into a glass of water. She knew it could make her very agitated right now. "What were you hiding from me?" The woman didn't understand her. "You see, the truth is, Emma wasn't as good at school as you think. She's not as bright as she is now. She's been dating Carlo, the one you like so much," a word Amanda emphasized, "for a long time, but he's not the best. I forbid it, and you allow it." "Why are you telling me all this?" Alexandra took a sip from a glass of the same water. "Mom, you do a lot for Emma, and sometimes it just makes it worse," the woman said quietly. "I would do anything for my granddaughter. This apartment where I live will go only to her," she said. "It's not about the apartment, it's about everything. I need my daughter to realize for a while that she has nowhere to go, no one to ask for help. So, Mom, don't be offended, but please, let's go to the village for a while, to your parents' house," Amanda asked her. "I don't get it," froze Alexandra and stopped sculpting. "Now, while Emma's at school, you'll go there. We'll say you've been taken to the intensive care unit in the region, and then we'll figure out what to do next. I'll visit you, but you won't see Emma. Her daughter asked me for a favor. You're up to something strange." I don't understand why the grandmother can't communicate with her granddaughter. But I will go to the village. It will even be good for me, the woman said then. She put the water on to boil, then lowered the dumplings down in there, boiled them, and she and Amanda had a very good meal. Well, you and I have a deal. Amanda said goodbye to her mother. Yes, tomorrow I will pack my bags, and while the fall, winter, and there in spring, cold, in the vegetable garden, no work, I will go there, agreed the woman. Amanda walked out of her mother's with a light heart. She thought she had done the right thing. Now that Emma would have nowhere to ask for help, maybe she would listen to her and do the right thing. I'm going to Grandma's, Emma said at home when she arrived for the weekend. And Grandma's not home, her mother answered her. How not, and where is she? The girl did not understand then. She'd been taken to the region, to the hospital. She was having heart trouble. Amanda lied to her. How? Why didn't you tell me anything? Emma was upset. They didn't want you to snap out of it and drive here. It was practically true, because if her mother had informed her, that one would have actually come. Emma went away to study again. Carlo never came. When she came for the weekend, she found her mother crying. What's wrong with you? Her daughter came up to her. She looked at her father's room. The doors were closed. The first thing that came to mind was that they'd had another fight or worse. Emma, honey, Grandma died, she told her, because she knew Emma was going to go to the hospital. How did she die? And when is the funeral? And where is she? The girl had so many questions. No one from the region could bring her here, and her sister lived there, so she took the body and said she would bury it there to take care of the grave. I went there, the woman sobbed. Mom, why didn't you take me with you? Emma felt like she was going to faint. She was so sick. She felt like she was in a stupor. You know, it all happened so fast, I couldn't even realize it myself. Amanda's hands were shaking. When are we going to visit her grave? The girl asked. We'll definitely go there soon, Amanda promised her. I went. The girl came out of the apartment. She didn't know where she was going or what she was doing. She was actually going to Carlo's house. She knocked and his mother opened the door. Hello, is Carlo home? She asked her in a murderous voice. Emma, come in, of course, she launched her. The girl went to the guy's room. He was lying on the bed. Carlo, hi. She sat down next to him. Hey, he wasn't looking at her. Why does it have to be like this? She started a conversation with him. How? He asked her a question. Why don't you come to me anymore? We couldn't even part properly. Emma was silent again. Sweetheart, please forgive me. He took her hand. What happened? Tell me. She wanted to know first what had happened between them, and then tell her sad tidings. You see, when the first situation with your mother happened, and then you had an abortion, and told me I wasn't a man, and I really wasn't. I realized that you and I shouldn't be together. You're young, but you're strong in character, and I'm just the way I am. To make me forget you, I cheated on you, he said, and then he stopped talking. I see, she replied calmly. You were so calm. I thought you were going to start a fight, yell at me, something. He averted his eyes. And my grandmother died, she told him. This news was more important and above all others, whatever she was told now. Beloved, please forgive me, even though I sometimes did stupid things, but I could not forget you, he hugged her. All right, you got anything to drink? She asked. Yes. Now, he went into the kitchen, took something out of the fridge, put it on the table. Emma drank a lot that night, so Carlo just put her to bed. She didn't get home until the next evening. She was very sick. No one could help her now in the state she was in. Mom, I don't care what you tell me now. I'm not going to study anymore. I'm quitting everything, and Carlo and I are leaving here, she told her when she came to her senses, especially since he had already agreed on that. How could you not realize that you can't be with him? Her mother clutched her head. She realized that now, if her daughter left everything and went away, she would ruin her life. But there was no changing Emma's mind. If she made up her mind, she'd do it anyway. "That's it, I'm ready," she came to Carlo. "I'm probably not going anywhere," he answered her. I didn't understand. She stared at him, thoughts of betrayal running through her mind. "Well, what is not clear? Just not going, and that's all." He turned away, and the girl realized that with this young man she is not on the way. The ticket was already in her pocket, so she didn't think about anything, didn't say goodbye to anyone, just got on the train and went. She didn't know where she was going, but she had heard about this city, so she wanted to settle there. She didn't have much money, so she rented an apartment. She started looking for a job. She didn't ask anyone for help, especially not her mother. She didn't want to humiliate herself in front of her. She would have thought that she warned her, but nobody listened to her. She had no education, so not everyone was sorry for the girl. "But you first take me, see how I work. If I do not pass the probation period, then you can just fire me," she asked the director of one of the stores. "How can you not understand? I need a saleswoman with experience, not the first one," he explained to her. "At least hire me as a cleaner." Emma begged him. "Okay, what to do with you?" he agreed. And from that moment on, the girl started cleaning the store. It was a thankless job because there were so many people. They trampled in a few minutes, and they had to go out into the hall again and clean up. "Emma, stop fiddling with that rag and come over here," one of the women who worked here called out to her. They were well settled in the back room after a day's work. What if the director comes? She wasn't afraid of him, she was more afraid of being fired. "Nah, definitely not coming today," they told her. "Okay." The girl sat down at the table with them. "Would you like me to tell your fortune?" Barbara, the one who worked here as a saleswoman, asked. "I don't believe in any of this." Emma waved her off. "Come on, what have you got to lose? Let's see what happens in the future," her new acquaintance begged her. "Oh, go ahead for laughs," Emma agreed. The woman pulled out the cards, began laying them out on the table. "Look, you'll meet a man soon," she pointed at the king. "Well, I know without you that I'll meet him soon enough," the girl snorted in response. "Oh, you're going to have it bad with him." Barbara clamped her hand over her mouth. "What kill?" The girl remembered her parents. "So, it looks like it's not you, but you yourself." The woman looked up at her. "Yeah, living like this only makes you want to get your hands on yourself." Emma picked up the glass and drank the liquid that had been poured into it. "There will be a surprise in your life," the saleswoman said. "So I'm not going to die after all." Emma grinned. "Well, no one knows that yet, but that's if you don't die, just in case," laughed the women. "And yet, will I get married or not?" wondered the already tipsy Emma. "Yes, but not right away. I can see that everything will be fine for you, a happy marriage, and a good man. But all this will be if you take your head." Barbara sighed and finished what she had left. "Oh, the local Nostradamus too." Emma frowned and got up and went on scrubbing the floors. Today she came home very tired and immediately lay down and fell asleep. Not a week later, the fateful meeting that Barbara had probably told her about had taken place. She was scrubbing the floor in the hall when a young man came in. "You don't have to go back and forth," Emma asked him. "What? I walk where I want," he looked back at her. "Well, if you don't appreciate other people's labor, please walk." She freaked out, grabbed a bucket, and went to the back room. "Why is she so nervous?" he asked the salesman. "Oh, never mind," she waved her hand at him. "New?" the man asked. "Aha," Barbara confirmed. "What's the name?" The buyer was curious. "Harvey, there you have it. Take what you want, go home," laughed the woman. "Is it hard for you to tell me her name?" he insisted. "Emma's her name, feeling better?" The salesman waited to see what he would tell her next. "Put him on," Harvey asked. "Now, off she goes to the back room. Emma, go. He's in there calling for you." "Who? I don't get it." Who? Harvey stomped. "Who just now?" Barbara explained. Why is he calling me? Emma didn't understand. Listen, that's enough. I'm a transmitter here. Come out, talk, or he will call, and you will not go. What do I have to do? Run back and forth? The woman said irritably, and went to her seat. Emma came out of the back room, looking at the young man. Look, I'm sorry. He handed her the candy bar he just bought. Come on, it's okay. She wanted to leave, but Harvey stopped her. What are you doing tonight? He asked her. What? Do you want to ask him out on a date? She asked him a question head-on. Why not, will you? He winked at Barbara. I'll go, Emma replied calmly. That's it, then it's a deal. I'll pick you up at 7. He didn't buy anything else, just walked out of the store. Who is it? The girl looked at the saleswoman. Oh, it's Harvey. He's a normal guy, he likes to drink, but if you start dating him, he'll blow the dust off you, Barbara told her. Okay, Emma went and did her business. There was nothing to do in the evening, so she agreed to meet Harvey. They met, talked, drank wine. The evening went smoothly. When a week of meetings passed, Harvey suggested moving in with him instead of spending money on renting an apartment. Emma didn't think long, agreed. Now they were living together. Just as Barbara had said, Harvey began to drink more and more every day as he got used to Emma. Before, maybe he'd wanted to impress her, so he'd held back, but now he was just drunk every day. He'd come home from work, sit in front of the TV, turn on the soccer game, and start drinking. Would you stop it? Emma came up to him one day. She realized that her mother's family was projected onto her. She's in the same situation now, except he doesn't hit her, maybe because he's not her husband yet. Would you shut up? He turned to her. How about I just leave? She turned around to leave, but the man grabbed her arm. Where to? He told her gruffly. What? Are you gonna talk to me like that again? She tried to pull her hand away from him, but she couldn't. But Harvey pushed her and she fell. You talk to me some more. He stood over her. Get off. Emma shoved him off with her legs and tried to stand up. She ran away from him that evening. She didn't take any of her things with her, just her bag, but he still managed to get a couple of hard knocks on it. Barbara, let me in. She banged on the door to her acquaintance. What's wrong? I opened the door frightened. Can I stay with you tonight? Emma asked her. Sure, come on in. She let her into her place. After that, the girl rented an apartment again, went to Collier's place and took her things. He apologized, but she wasn't going to forgive him for such a thing. She had seen how it could all end when she was a child. Emma lived here for 6 months, realized that nothing would work out, bought tickets again, and went to her hometown. Emma sat on the train, looked out the window, and realized that she missed her mother. As ridiculous as it sounded, she really did. She knocked on her family door. Her mother opened it. Hi, Emma told her calmly. Daughter, come in quickly. Where have you been for so long? They hugged, immediately went to the kitchen, and the mother began to ask what and how her daughter's life had been recently. I'm fine, you can be glad Carlo didn't come with me. I went there alone, and I rethought everything. I even met a man, lived with him for a few months, but he was no better than our father, Emma began to tell her. And what, did you leave him? The mother asked, and waited very much for an answer. Of course, I'm not like you. I won't put up with it all my life, snickered my daughter in response. Well, yes, you're stronger in spirit. You're good. You were able to do that. Mom shook her head. What about you and your father? She didn't even have to ask, but she felt like asking the question. Well, while he's quiet, the mother replied, he drinks once a month now, but for a few days at a time. And as soon as that happens, he gets the balls behind the rollers again. It's clear, nothing has changed, Emma told her and looked out the window. This evening, you could say, went perfectly for mother and daughter. The father didn't even come out to greet her. He, as in his childhood, did not care what his daughter was doing. They talked, watched TV, and went to bed afterward. Emma even thought that maybe something had changed in her, and maybe her mother had realized something. Maybe everything would be all right with them now. "Mom, remember when you promised me we'd go to Grandma's grave?" Emma reminded her this morning. "Yes, we'll definitely go to see her. I'll just find a car, arrange a driver, and then we'll go," Amanda said. And in the evening, Emma went for a walk and, strangely enough, she met Carlo again. "Oh hey," he saw her. "Yeah, hi, I guess you and I will never part," the girl laughed. "We are going to the countryside. Will you come with us?" he asked her. "Why not? Let's go and talk," she agreed. When they arrived there, where the company had already gathered, in which Emma knew everyone, the friends were surprised that the couple was together again. As if nothing had changed, one of the guys said, "What, are you jealous?" Carlo turned to him. It went well. The guy acted as if nothing had ever happened in their lives, as if he hadn't betrayed her by not going anywhere with her. They were kissing, hugging. You could say that history was beginning to repeat itself all over again. "So, how was your time?" Mom asked when Emma got home. You don't have to ask. She knew that if she told her mother about Carlo, they would start fighting again. "Emma, you know we're a small town. It was reported to me a long time ago that you went out with Carlo again yesterday, and you were together, sitting with your mom in the kitchen. So," she looked at the woman defiantly. "I thought that you went away, came to your senses, realized that without education, without parental support, without everything else, you can't live in this world. But it turns out that you started all over again. Your mom didn't yell, but she spoke in such a way that you could take everything for a yell. Mom, if you want me to, I'll go." Emma told her back. "Where are you going to go?" Amanda shouted at her defiantly. "Grandma has an empty apartment. I know she wanted to leave it to me. Why can't I move in?" asked the daughter. "Oh, you just wanted the apartment, I see. And bring Carlo there, huh?" The woman smirked. "That's it, I'm sick of this." Emma jumped up from her chair. She grabbed her clothes and ran out of the driveway. Emma didn't want to go to Carlo's house because she realized that their relationship might not work out. She didn't know where else to go. After hanging out on the street until evening, she returned home. She didn't talk to her mother, much less her father. In the morning, when everyone had gone to work, Emma went into the bathtub and picked up a razor blade. "Now I will open my veins, and then they will dance when they see that all this happened because of them," the girl said ambitiously to herself. She held the blade over her wrist while she remembered Barbara's words to her about wanting to commit suicide. No, she tossed the blade aside. "Who am I going to make it worse?" The girl got out of the bath, went to her room, lay down on the couch and cried. She didn't understand how to live her life or what to do next. "Carlo, hi," she called to him. "Hi," he replied in a very unfriendly manner. "Come on, let's meet tonight," she called him out herself. "Okay, you got any dough?" he asked back. "I'll find it if I have to," Emma replied. "Okay, I'll wait for you outside my house tonight," Carlo told her and hung up. Naturally, Emma didn't have any money because she hadn't worked anywhere yet, and she couldn't bring anything with her, but she knew where to get it. The girl reached into her father's nightstand and pulled out his purse, which she knew for sure had money in it. She took a few bills and put them in her pocket. After that, she got dressed, walked around the street for a while, and then went to her friend's house for the night. She did not come home, and her mother realized that her daughter was again going out with the same guy from whom she had taken her away. "Emma, I'm begging you, take your head, think about your future. You're so young, you've got so much ahead of you. You have nothing, no education, no job, no money, nothing. How are you going to live?" Her mother begged her. "Mom, what are you attached to me? I am an adult, I can decide for myself," said her daughter in response. "Ah, you can decide for yourself, so why are you living here with us?" Go to the other side and live on your own. Let your Carlo try to provide for you." Amanda started to raise her voice. At that moment, my father came out of the room. "Amanda, did you take money from me?" he asked her. "I don't come into your room at all," she answered him. "Emma," she looked at her daughter. "Why me? Maybe you spent it yourself, and now you want to say it's us." Emma started to justify herself. "Okay, all right." He sat down on the couch. He wasn't going anywhere. Amanda began to worry that Billy might be up to his old tricks again. Without sitting through anything, the man got up and went to his room. The girl realized that he was going to put away his briefcase. "I'm going out," she said the next night, went out, met up with her friend, wandered around together, then went to Carlo's. They sat, drank, talked, and at some point Emma just fell asleep. She woke up to distinctive sounds and saw Carlo and her friend lying together on the couch. At that moment, they had no clothes on. She realized that it wasn't that simple. "Hey!" she shouted at her. "Ah, leave it alone. We don't have time for this." She said a few words and turned her back to the young man again. Emma dressed quickly, running out of this apartment. She realized she was never coming back here again. It didn't hurt as much now as it had the other times. She ran home and cried for a long time. Her mother asked her what had happened, but her daughter wouldn't tell her anything. Emma decided to enroll in a local college to catch up on her studies and get some sort of degree. After a few weeks of studying, she met a young man. After a couple of meetings, she decided to tell her mother about it. "So, how are you doing? It's been so long since we've talked to you," the woman asked her. "Mom, I met Jack, and I guess he's coming to visit us tomorrow," Emma told her kindly. "Jack who?" The woman didn't understand. Emma couldn't answer her with which one because she didn't know his last name, but she explained visually where her mother could see him and who he was socializing with. "Come on, he's a scumbag," Amanda told her. "What do you mean?" Her daughter looked at her. "There's no point. You won't be socializing with him." The mother got up from her chair. Again, Emma couldn't understand what was going on. Why her mother, whoever she was going to date, was forbidding her to do so. Not again, but again, the woman answered her. She knew this Jack. First, he was more than 10 years older than her daughter, and second, he had been in a criminal gang in the 90s. Emma just didn't feel like saying anything. She didn't know what to do right now. Crying wouldn't help. There was nowhere to go. She was so angry with her mother that she would do anything. "Where are you going?" Amanda asked her when she saw Emma going somewhere. "None of your business," she replied. She ran outside, her insides churning, her hands shaking. If she ran into her right now, she would probably have a fight with her right now. The girl ran to Jack, but he wasn't home. She didn't know what to do. Then she called her old friends, suggested to meet, to remember her youth. She had a gold ring on her finger that her mother had once given her. To get money, Emma had turned it into a place that accepted gold. Now she could afford to treat the girls. That evening they bought a lot of alcohol and snacks and went to one of the girls' garden cottages. They sat there, reminiscing about how they used to go out, celebrating, and Emma didn't notice how intoxicated she was. Then she felt bad. She was lying somewhere. She didn't realize whether her friends were with her or not. She had to go home, but she didn't know how to do it. Emma struggled to pull herself together and stood up. Her head was spinning, the ground swaying, so she walked home. She couldn't remember how she got to the floor. "Where have you been? Look at the state you're in." Her mother started yelling at her from the doorstep. "Mom, I need to lie down," Emma told her. "Look at you. What do you look like?" She walked her to her room and yelled at her back. At that moment, my father came out of the room. "What's going on here?" He didn't understand. "Here, your daughter has come from the party, and she looks just like you." His wife shouted in his face. "What are you yelling about?" he asked her. "I want to yell." The woman lost all fear. "Emma, where have you been?" Her father turned to her. "Oh, what's it to you? Never cared." And now he was suddenly interested. She turned to him and spoke with a curl of her lips. "How are you talking to me, you juvenile brat?" He went at her. "Come on, hit. You are not used to hitting women." The daughter did not understand anything, so now was very brave. "I'll," swung Billy at Emma. "Don't touch her." His mother grabbed his arm. Yes, touch her better, you're more used to it," Emma told him and smiled. She sat on the edge of the couch, not understanding anything at all. "What did you say?" The father took another step toward his daughter. "Leave her out of it. You can see she's in such a state," Amanda yanked Billy back sharply. "Fuck you." He punched her. The woman fell, banging her head against the wall. "I'll never forgive you for this." She held her bruised hand to the bruised spot. "And you think I'll forgive you for all your outings, all your drunkenness, all your men, when you came back in an incomprehensible state, at an incomprehensible time?" He stood over her and shouted. Emma at this time had just laid down on the couch. She didn't realize anything when she heard her mother screaming, opened one eye, saw her getting up from the floor, and tried to get up too. "Don't touch her," she shouted to her father. "And you don't say a word at all, little girl." He turned to her. Amanda stood up at that time, wanting to walk past her husband, but she caught his arm, causing him to anger her. Billy was unstoppable. He turned around, grabbed his wife by the hair, and started just beating her. At some point, she lost consciousness and just settled on the floor. Emma woke up when it was night. She went into the kitchen, opened the gas burners, and went out onto the balcony. Amanda was still lying on the floor. She showed no signs of life, so Emma decided to get revenge on her father so he wouldn't be here anymore. "I'm so sick of you." Still sober, the girl began to settle down. The cold was making itself felt. She slowly began to come to herself, realized that she was already sitting on the floor of the balcony, plugged her nose, went into the apartment, turned off the burners, opened the windows. To be sure, she took her father's pills, which were prescribed to him when he came out of a binge, and added them to his tea, but he was already unconscious. Emma went into her room and went to bed. In the morning, she woke up, looked around, not realizing what was happening. Her mother was lying on the floor. She went and looked into her father's room. He was lying sprawled on the bed. Mom approached. She took her, but the woman didn't move. Daddy, she went to the next room, but he didn't react either. The girl vaguely remembered what had happened during the night, but she couldn't say anything specific. Emma rushed to the phone, dialed 03, called an ambulance, and waited. When the medics arrived, they naturally started asking what had happened here. The police were called in. "You see, me and my girlfriends were celebrating one of their girlfriends' birthdays yesterday." Emma began to lie to them. And what happened next? They waited for the sequel. Of course, I wasn't in a very good condition. I got ready to go home. When I got there, it smelled very strongly of gas. Mom was already lying like that. I turned off the burners and went to bed, she told them. "What time was it?" the police officer asked. "It was already early in the morning," she said. "Why didn't you call an ambulance right away?" the employee asked. "I don't know, I was scared. I ran from my mother to my father, but then I felt bad. I dozed off a little. You could see that the girl was still not herself." Afterwards, the medics confirmed that the death was indeed from gas asphyxiation. Emma, when she sobered up completely, realized what she had done, but she still did not fully realize it, because she was not in the right state at that moment. The funeral had to be organized. The mother on her father's side, who hadn't spoken to the family in years because Amanda had fought with her about Billy, said she would do everything herself. "Baba Sarah, thank you." Emma hugged her. "That's it, come on, I have business to attend to," the woman answered her. She actually hired diggers, made arrangements with everyone to make sure everything was done properly. On the appointed day, A farewell was held for Paul and Amanda. It was decided to bury them together. Maybe they shouldn't. They've lived like cat and dog all their lives, Emma asked her grandmother. Look, I'll decide for myself, her grandmother told her, as if she were accusing her of something. I don't think Mom will be happy in the other world with him, the girl supposed. They don't care anymore, Grandma Sarah answered her. A lot of people came to the funeral, many Emma had never even seen in her life. They were all relatives of her grandmother's, her father, her mother. Everyone was talking. There was such a buzz. Emma couldn't stand to be with them. She stepped aside to keep things quiet. When they were already in the cemetery, Emma became hysterical. Tears were just rolling down her eyes. She realized that she didn't remember anything from that night, but she suspected that it was her fault that her parents had died, that she had brought them to this point. She apologized to herself, and as soon as she thought about what had happened, she felt dizzy and tears rolled from her eyes. Mummy, how can I be without you now? She fell on her knees in front of the coffin. Emma, get up. Grandma Sarah lifted her up. Leave me alone. They're my parents. She shouted and waved her arms. It was obvious that the girl had just realized what had happened. Someone handed her a glass, and she smelled valerian. She drank it, but it didn't help. And then suddenly Emma remembered how she had shouted at her mother that she wished she would die as soon as possible, wanted something to happen to them, and in general, she had wished a lot of bad things before. It all came to a head at once, and the tears came even harder. She sobbed as she heard someone calling her. Emma, calm down, it's going to be okay. The girl turned around. The voice was muffled but very familiar, and when she saw who was speaking, she just passed out. All the people in the cemetery thought it was the result of hysteria and tears. They tried to revive her with ammonia, but it didn't work. They had to call an ambulance right at the cemetery. Wait, don't call, I'll take her there myself, a man volunteered. Okay, the rest of us didn't care about that. I'll go with you. The woman came up to him and helped carry Emma to the car. After that, they got in and drove to the nearest hospital ward. Emma opened her eyes and saw that she was in a hospital. There was a distinctive odor, and the walls were painted the way they were only painted there. She heard that voice again and turned her head. Grandma, am I crazy? She saw Alexandra in front of her. Granddaughter, what's the matter with you? She bent over her and felt her forehead with her lips. You're dead. Emma closed her eyes. What, who told you that? The woman was shocked by the words. Mom, still the girl didn't open her eyes. What else did she tell you? Now it was beginning to dawn on Alexandra why her daughter always came to see her alone and everything else. Nothing. She kept promising me we'd go to your grave, but she never took me there, Emma said slowly. Obviously, not taken away. If I'm alive and well, lived all this time in the village, waiting for you to improve, and I can return. Only now the woman realized what nonsense it is. Why did she listen to her daughter and go there? Maybe things would be different now. So she tricked me. Emma didn't understand why Mom did it. So she fooled everyone, the woman muttered. And now what? The girl lay there with her eyes closed. Nothing, you come out of your shock. Let's go home, and there we'll figure out what to do, having made sure that everything was normal with her granddaughter. The grandmother went out into the corridor, and then went home. On the way, Alexandra replayed in her head what her daughter had once told her. And now it was only 8 months after that. How could she have lied and kept this secret for so long? There was another surprise waiting for her at home. No one had been here since she'd left, so the dust was knee-deep. The windows were dirty, and she had to start cleaning. Did you see a woman come out of here just now? Emma asked the nurse who had entered her room. Sure, she looked at her. Thank you, Emma replied. Are you all right? The nurse bent over her. Yes, the girl shook her head. Before that, she just thought that because of the shock and the hysteria, Maybe something in her brain had broken and she was seeing ghosts. "Will you be ready to go home tomorrow morning?" a young girl in a white coat asked her. "I think so." Emma was still shocked by everything that had happened. They gave her an injection, she slept a little more, and when she got up in the morning she felt very well. After she was discharged, she immediately went to her grandmother's apartment. "Hello, come in." She opened the door. "Tell me how in our world this can be." "How?" Walked the girl into the kitchen, sat on a stool and looked at her grandmother. "I don't understand it myself. Your mother said I was spoiling you, that I should go away so you'd feel unsupported. I listened, I left. And now, when the locals started talking, I don't know what, that my daughter and her husband had died, I packed my things and went back, because it's not clear what was going on here," Alexandra told her. And the girl sat there and just did not believe in everything that was happening. "Do you know how bad I felt when my mother told me you were gone?" Emma stared at one point and remembered that moment. I imagined the grandmother stood up and hugged her granddaughter. "I'd rather you had me than all that happened to me." She told her how she'd left town, how she'd tried to live there, dropped out of school and everything. "Tell me better what happened in the apartment at night." Alexandra wanted to know everything firsthand. "I told you." Emma didn't want to admit to anyone that she didn't remember anything. "Well, maybe you told one version to the police and tell me another," Grandma speculated. "For example," Emma looked at her, "you were the one who told me about Billy hitting Amanda, so maybe it was something like that now." And then Emma's mind flashed back to that first blow that night, when her father had thrown her mother against the wall. Yes, indeed, they started fighting. She stopped talking abruptly. "Why are you so quiet?" The woman looked at her, and Emma was thinking that if she had seen the fight start, why did she say she had come afterward? Because she had been at a friend's birthday party. It didn't make sense. "Yes, I only told one lie to the police." She lowered her eyes to avoid looking at her grandmother. "And what was it?" the other one asked. "When I was at home, they started fighting. I got scared and ran out of the house. My girlfriends and I went out to celebrate, but none of us had birthdays." Now that was closer to the truth. "I see. So then, when you came in, the gas was open." Grandma continued her interrogation. "Yes, that's what I was telling you about." The girl nodded her head. "How did nothing explode?" Alexandra wondered. "That's what I was thinking. I closed the burners, opened the windows, and I could have come in and turned on the light, for example." A granddaughter quickly gibbered to her. "Well, if I'd gotten here early, I probably would have turned on the lights." Grandma shook her head. Perhaps she suspected her granddaughter of something, but now there was nothing to prove, so she sighed and stopped talking about it. "Grandma, I'm so glad you're alive, that we'll be together now. You are my only, most beloved person in the world. Mom, I love too, but I was always more comfortable and better with you." She hugged the woman. Alexandra realized that her granddaughter was not all right if she had such hysterics. "Why was my mom like that? Why did she always forbid me everything? I started dating one man can't. With the other one it was bad too, nothing good. That father of mine, Billy, ruined my mother's life and mine." Emma almost cried. Emma tensed. She realized that she was being commanded again, that they were trying to teach her again. It made her feel uncomfortable, and her body began to fight back. "Grandma, I understand you have to go to the doctors when you're older, but why should I?" Emma didn't understand. "You've had such a shock in your life, you need to see doctors, whether everything is all right with your psyche, what to do next and how to be. And it would never be unnecessary, no matter how her grandmother persuaded her." "Okay, your take." She realized it was pointless to argue now. After that, the grandmother called one specialist, another specialist, found some people she knew. She understood from Emma's behavior that she really needed help and was ready to do everything to help her granddaughter. First, they went through the usual doctors. The therapist wrote a referral to a psychologist at Alexandra's request. Now it was necessary to persuade Emma to go to him. And why to him? Would it be a man? She asked her grandmother. I don't know who will be there. Well, I just say to him, because the grandmother excused herself to her, although she knew that there would really be a man there. Okay, the girl agreed with her. She missed school for a while there were all these events, but now she wanted to come again to recover. Today was her first trip to her doctor. Hello. She entered the office and saw a young man sitting at the desk. Greetings, Emma. He got up from his chair and walked towards her. Don't touch me. He took her hands and wanted to say hello, but the girl pulled away. Why are you afraid of me like fire? I won't do anything bad to you, said the doctor. I'm sorry. The girl looked at him spitefully. Have a seat. My name is Barry, he told her, and took his own seat. Emma, she was looking anywhere but at him. So, let's begin. He laid out some papers in front of him. Good, she nodded. I know you've had a lot of grief recently, Barry began to say. Yes, she nodded. Is that the problem you came to me with? He was trying to get her to talk. Or rather, my grandmother led me to you, she smiled, because she's an adult herself now, and her grandmother still takes her to doctors. All right, well, it doesn't matter. What's important is that you agreed, and now you're here. All the while the doctor has been friendly. Yeah, well, Emma was starting to get used to this office. Maybe you can tell me a little about yourself, your parents, your grandmother, he asked her. I study at a local school, lived with my parents for a while, then I left, came back to them again, the girl said crumply. Well, praised Barry, let's do a little drawing with you. The specialist put a piece of paper in front of her and gave her pencils. What are we in kindergarten? She started to take it in stride again. Why kindergarten? I just want to get to know you better. And sometimes a drawing says a lot about a person, no matter how old they are, the psychologist explained to her. Well, what should I draw? She waited for his advice. I don't know. Draw anything? Yourself, grandma, dog, house, mom, dad, sky, trees, whatever. He waited. Okay. Emma took a black pencil and she got almost the entire drawing in a darker tone. Why didn't you make the trees green or the clouds blue? Barry asked her. Well, I didn't want to color. I just drew all over with an outline and made some shadows, she answered him. Understandably, he tucked the sheet away to his side. They talked a lot more after that. It was over for the day, and Barry helped the girl put on her coat. Shall I walk you out? He asked her. What do you think? I can't make it on my own. She started being rude to him again. No, of course you will. Just offering a gentlemanly gesture, he smiled. They made arrangements for their next meeting. Emma went home. As she walked, she thought she had a good-looking doctor. She liked him, though she was afraid to admit it to herself. It even seemed to the girl that he liked her too. But Emma didn't believe that someone like him could fall in love with someone like her. At home, Grandma pestered with questions about what had happened, what she had said, how it was, but Emma only smiled and kept silent. Why don't you say anything to me? Grandma wondered. Let at least a few of our meetings pass, then I'll tell you everything, looked at her granddaughter. The next meeting was already more friendly. Emma entered the office, smiled, and said hello. There, that's a different matter altogether. The young man smiled back at her. Today Emma was doing all his demands, answering, showing, drawing, and, without realizing it herself, flirting with the doctor. After the fourth meeting, it seemed that Emma didn't need any more specialist help, but the girl didn't think so. Let's go out, Barry suggested to her. Emma wasn't wrong. He really liked her. Good. It was nice for a girl to be courted by such a young man. They went to a cafe, and there, just as in the office, they sat and talked, only the atmosphere was more relaxed. Will I? He asked her a question after the meeting. Sure, You can even stop by for a visit. Grandma is eager to meet you." Emma smiled at him. The girl noticed that she smiled more often and became happy. Now she was not burdened by anything. Her beloved grandmother was nearby. "No, not this time. I want it to be like people," Barry muttered. "Okay, I feel really good around you," she looked at him. "And me with you. At first, I thought I was just feeling sorry for you and needed to help you. But then I realized that wasn't the case at all." He took her hands in his. "Barry, are we going to have any more sessions?" She looked up from downstairs. "No, but I'll make an appointment for you tomorrow. And tell your grandmother to expect us to visit together," he muttered to her. "Good." He kissed her on the cheek, and they parted near the entryway. "Emma, you are glowing with happiness," greeted her on the doorstep Alexandra. "Grandma, I'm so grateful to you. Confess, did you find me such a doctor on purpose?" Emma hugged the woman. "Granddaughter, if everything works out, I will be very happy. I wanted to find a great specialist to help me, but it turns out I killed 2 birds with 1 stone," Grandma whispered quietly. They had dinner, and the granddaughter deliberately did not tell the woman anything. She realized that tomorrow she and Barry would come here to visit, and he would explain everything himself. Ah, yes, they were already in beds. What? Alexandra was aroused. She understood the state of the girl. Every movement was under control. "My counselor and I will come see you tomorrow," the girl chuckled. "And that's wonderful news," muttered Grandma and lay down again. She thought that if things worked out now and Emma came to live with Barry, she wouldn't be afraid to leave. And then she thought about what she once thought about her daughter and Billy, and how that had turned out. She put those thoughts aside for later. She'd see what happened tomorrow, and then she'd draw conclusions. "Emma, wake up!" Her grandmother came over to her bed. The girl opened her eyes, smelling pancakes. Just like when she was a kid, she sucked in air. "Come on, let's go to breakfast, and then to study." The woman lifted her up. "Grandma, you're the best." Emma couldn't believe that she had once had a very different life. They walked together to the kitchen, and as they had done long ago, sat drinking tea and enjoying flavorful and thin pancakes with melted butter. Bye. The girl kissed her grandmother and left the apartment. After she recovered at school, she was unrecognizable. Not only that she began to communicate completely differently with her classmates, but also her studies improved. No one understood what had happened to the brat Emma used to be. Home again after school, Emma knew her grandmother was waiting with lunch and then to meet Barry, who had done it all to her. "I came in, she was in the apartment. And I'm waiting," shouted Alexandra from the kitchen. "What's that delicious smell you're smelling?" Emma washed her hands and went into the kitchen. Getting ready for tonight, she pointed to the oven. "I never doubted you." The granddaughter kissed her grandmother again. They had lunch. The girl changed her clothes and went to the place where they had arranged to meet Barry. "Hey, how long have you been waiting?" He rushed to the girl. "No, just recently arrived," she confessed. "This is for you." He handed her a beautiful bouquet of white roses. "And who's this for?" She pointed to the large barred flowers he had in his other hand. "What do you think? I'm a man and I go to visit women," he winked at her. "Grandma." Emma made big eyes. "What did you think I was gonna bring her?" He was waiting for an answer. "I don't know. Anything useful," she laughed. "Okay, let's go." He pulled her by the arm. "Let's go." The girl was pleased. They quickly made their way to their grandmother's house, entering the entryway. "I'm worried. This is the first time this has happened to me," Barry exhaled. "Oh, you're about to see her now, and you'll immediately realize it's all for nothing." She opened the doors and they walked in. "Children, hello." As if she heard them, a woman came to the door. "These are for you, very nice, Barry." The young man held out the flowers. "Thank you, I'm Alexandra." She breathed in the scent of roses. They made their way to the hall, and it was there that Grandmother set the table. "How cozy and delicious it smells here," Barry said. "You haven't tried anything yet," Emma whispered to him. "Everything will work out in time." The woman was happy. She took the plates and began to put on various delicious things. "Oh, I feel like I'm going to walk out of here a few pounds more today," laughed Barry. "Come on, you," laughed Grandma, and finally sat back down. "Alexandra, I'd like to talk to you about your granddaughter." He looked at Emma. "Of course, I'd like to bring it up too." The woman stopped talking because she really wanted to know what and how their relationship was going. "It's a pleasure to talk to her." He took Emma's hand. "And I think we're serious, don't you?" Of course, the girl blossomed with happiness. "What did you decide?" Grandma was ready to cry. "I think we'll keep in touch for now, but I'm ready right now to pick her up in an armful and carry her away to hide her from the world, so that no one else will ever hurt her or do anything wrong." Barry pressed Emma against him. "If my decision is needed, I'm all for it. It's high time to get my hands on this beast," Alexandra laughed. "Then it's settled. I rent an apartment in your city. We can come to live with me." He looked at one and the other. "Why, Emma has a lovely apartment where she lived with her parents," said, and then a startled-looking grandmother looked at her granddaughter. "It's okay," she gestured to her. "No, I don't agree with that. I've got some savings, and I don't think Emma would be happy living where her family died," Barry said and squeezed the girl's hand. "What do you suggest?" Emma's the one who got in on the conversation. "We can sell this very apartment. I'll add on, and we'll buy a bigger one." It was obvious that Barry was determined. "I don't mind." Emma was happy. "That's the deal," clapped Grandma's hands. After everything was cleared up, they sat for a long time. Barry explained some things that interested Alexandra. Then he got ready to go home. "Be sure to come again." The woman saw off what she thought was her future son-in-law. "Bye." Emma kissed him innocently. Granny retired to the kitchen. She couldn't wait until Emma got there to help her wash the dishes. "Well, finally," she turned to her granddaughter. "Well." The girl's eyes were shining. "Whoa," showed Grandma a thumbs up. "Grandma, I'm happy." She hugged the woman. "Look, of course, this may look wrong right now, but I'm going to say it nonetheless." Alexandra looked into her granddaughter's eyes. "What is it?" She tensed up. "I was the one who almost forced your mother to marry Billy, and now I'm telling you to do the same." The woman lowered her eyes to the floor. "You realize that this is my opinion now, and no one forbids me to fulfill what I want," cried Emma. "My darling, I love you so much, and I want you to be happy, and Barry is just the man to give you that happiness," Grandma cried with her. "It's settled then." They stood together again, the woman thinking, if her mother couldn't give her all that warmth and affection, she and Barry will make up for it. From that moment on, the sale of the apartment began. And if Emma had told her grandmother that she was fine and had no emotions, now, walking into the place where she lived with her mom and dad, she was just shaken. "What's wrong with you?" Barry felt it. "It's okay." She looked at the spot where her mother lay. "No, I see and understand everything. You need to leave." He did the rest with Alexandra. Emma no longer interfered in these matters. They sold Emma's apartment. Barry added money to buy a new one. "No need to hurry," his grandmother told him. "Why?" The young man didn't understand. "First get married, and then buy an apartment. Things happen in life." She turned away. "What do you mean?" Barry didn't understand. "That's it, I won't say anything else." The woman walked away from him. "Emma, will you marry me?" He held out the ring to her. Of course, he could not have asked. She took the box. They continued to meet. Only now the young man began to visit Alexandra's apartment more often. Grandma made sure the young ones had everything like everyone else. Barry kept up with her. He had some savings. He added to everything. And now they realized that their happy day is only a week away. The waiting could have been maddening. Do you agree? When Emma heard those words, she almost fainted, realizing that this was all really happening. Yeah, she screamed, and then Barry picked her up in his arms and began to spin her around. They had bought their own apartment, and now the landlady was in the process of organizing it. Her grandmother helped her in everything. She wanted to do everything she could to make everything good for the couple. I would like to live to see my great-grandchildren, Alexandra sometimes cried. No need to rub your heart. Be sure to live up to it. In those moments, Barry and Emma were visiting her. Your words should be in God's ears, my grandmother repeated more than once. That was enough. Emma stood up from the table. She had been thinking about her never-coming pregnancy for a long time. She had only bad thoughts. Since that first abortion, she had never gotten pregnant again. That's why she thought that she would never become a mother again. Why is enough enough? Barry turned to her. Please, love, stop talking about it, she begged him. Good. He put a finger to his lips to get Alexandra to stop talking about it too. They went on with their lives, but no one thought anything terrible could happen. But things can't always be perfect. And in Barry and Emma's family, something happened that almost killed Alexandra. I won't be long, I'll meet the girls, and then I'll go straight home, Emma told her husband as she put on her coat. Why are you reporting back? You could have said nothing. He walked over and kissed her. That's it, bye, she winked and left the apartment. Emma had been invited by her friends. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. She didn't want to go, but Barry persuaded her, saying that she was stuck at home and never left the house. Then the girl agreed. She saw them standing on the steps of the restaurant. Why are you guys standing here? Wanting to gather all and then come in? Here you go, you're the last one. Now they all entered the building with a merry company. Guys, how long has it been since we've seen each other? Everyone was happy to be together. I'll be right back. Emma got up from the table. She had to go to the bathroom. She went to the stairs, and as she was coming down, she saw him. It was Carlo. As soon as the girl saw him, everything in her life evaporated. Her husband, her friends, her happy life, her apartment. It all went to the background. Emma? He stood looking at her. Carlo, hi. She came very close to him. You okay in here? He didn't know what to do or say. Actually, I don't live far away. She looked at him. Yeah, I didn't know. I just got here. He looked away. Let's go for a walk, she beckoned to him. I'm in the car. We can sit in it, Carlo suggested, so we don't get cold. Okay. Emma didn't care about her friends waiting for her anymore. She had an unfinished relationship here. They went downstairs. Outside, the girl's phone was ringing, but she didn't answer it. And even though it was Barry, right now all her thoughts were on Carlo. How are you doing? How are you living? He asked her. I got married. I have a wonderful husband. Works as a psychologist. She herself didn't know why she said that. And you? And I lived with a girl, but it didn't work out. So now I'm alone. You could tell Carlo was shy. Let's go, Emma told him. Where to? He asked. Remember you told me yourself that you shouldn't ask like that. She laughed. Yeah, how far? He finally turned to her. Whatever, she laughed. Emma, he started the car. What about the husband? It didn't matter. She hadn't planned anything today. She just wanted to be near this man. Okay, he's on his way. They went to the place where they used to love to stand and talk. It was a simple field, but it was so romantic. Why? Carlo asked her. What? She didn't understand. I've done so many bad things to you and you're still with me. He didn't look at Emma. Who told you I was in love? She smirked. Emma had thought about that question many times. If her mother hadn't forbidden her to talk to him then, she would have realized what he was really like and left him. But it didn't happen that way, and those feelings, like first love, were still sitting somewhere deep. Well, he fell silent. Carlo, she turned to him, overcoming her feelings. Take me home. Presently, he opened her doors. got behind the wheel. When Emma arrived home, Barry was asleep. She didn't wake him, but lay down beside him. Her mind was filled with thoughts of Carlo. She didn't know what to do. She had two options, but it was her grandmother's decision. "Emma, come to my place," Alexandra called the next day. "Hi," she walked in on her. "So, my dear," my grandmother began and hugged her. "Bah, what are you doing?" She looked at the woman. "I know," crouched the one very close to her granddaughter. "I knew it." The girl lowered her eyes. "So," Grandma sighed. "I don't know what to do," her granddaughter confessed to her. "Look, darling, I'm not forever, and soon no one will be able to advise you at all. But believe me, he who has betrayed once, and I know he has done it more than once, will do it again. And Barry will suffer. Think about that." She stood up and looked at Emma. "Grandma," my granddaughter clung to her and cried. "I'm not telling you anything. Think for yourself," Alexandra told her, because she didn't want to forbid anything. At home, Barry noticed that his wife's mood had changed. "Darling, shall I go for a little while?" she asked him. For the 100th time, "Why do you ask?" He smiled. "Okay." She headed for the exit. As she walked down the stairs, she no longer thought of Carlo as some unattainable prize. Now she realized that she had everything: her grandmother, a husband, and maybe soon she'd have children. Children. He forced her to have an abortion. Because of him, she could not have children. Such anger overcame the girl. "Hi." He waved at her as she approached. "Yeah, hello." She looked at him with completely different eyes. "What are you doing?" he wondered. "Nothing, and I'm not going anywhere with you." At this point, Emma saw how old, ugly, and he had become. What else could she not say? "Emma, I'm already tuned in." He said something else, but the girl wasn't listening to him anymore. She was heading back home. "Barry, I love you so much. What a fool I've been." She hugged him. "Emma, I understand everything and I can't live like this." He stood up and walked towards the exit. "You're good. That's the way to do it with me," she said to him. And when the door slammed, the girl just fell to the floor and howled like an animal. The next day, Grandma came in. She comforted her, stroked her head, said nice words, but nothing could help Emma. "Call him," Alexandra said. "I can't," cried the granddaughter again. "Dial, you'll see, he'll understand." The woman squeezed the girl's shoulder. "Okay," she agreed. That evening, when Emma was home alone, she picked up the phone and dialed Barry's number. "Hi," she said guiltily. "What did you want?" His voice was so distressed, it was scary and hurtful. "Forgive me." She waited for his answer, but her husband remained silent. "Are you sure?" She knew that by those words he meant if she'd had something with Carlo. 100%, it wasn't easy for her either. "I can't." She heard him crying. "Barry, if you don't save me now, no one else will save me," she told him. "Emma, it's going to take some time. I'll realize everything, and maybe we'll get back together." He didn't promise, he just said it. "I'll wait for you." I understood everything. She told him about the unfinished story she was thinking about. "And now I'm kidding myself for not staying with you, because you were my happiness. You were the only man in my life who made me happy. That's it. Let's not talk about it anymore." And he hung up. "Did you and Barry have a talk?" her grandmother asked her. "Yes, I called him." Her granddaughter told her everything. "What are you going to do now?" Alexandra didn't understand her. "Can I stay at your place?" Emma asked, realizing she couldn't do it alone in the apartment. "Of course. Why would you ask that? Just get the things you need and come over." Grandma was always willing to accommodate her. Emma continued to study. Now her grandmother, as before, woke her up in the morning, fed her delicious breakfasts, but even this was no longer pleasing. "What's the matter with you, tell me?" Alexandra told her when she saw her sour face. "How could I do that? I had the best man in the world, and I just lost my happiness," she said. "Don't worry, you'll be fine." Grandma believed it. It had been almost a year since they'd broken up, and no matter how many times Emma called Barry, he either didn't pick up or just hung up. Now she was just thinking that she had to do something about the apartment, split it up or sell it to make things fair. Emma, hi. She saw him outside the house when she went out to study. What are you doing here? Tears rolled down my eyes and started streaming down my cheeks. I get it, I realize it, I love you, I believe you, he hugged her. Barry, she threw herself on his neck. Let's go home, the husband whispered in his wife's ear. They arrived, spent a few unforgettable days. All this time Emma did everything for her husband, and he did everything for her. It could not but please her. Sweetheart, why don't we go to Grandma's and tell her everything? Emma asked. Of course he hugged and kissed her. I love you, she pulled him against her. And as he spun her around just as he had the first time. When Grandma found out that they were back together, she couldn't find a place to sit. She kept saying that she should have been warned. She would have cooked something. But now she was welcoming guests with an empty table. Grandma, we are so happy that we don't need any food, her granddaughter told her. Barry, it's been 3 months since they got together. What's the emergency? He threw his bag down because his wife had called and asked him to come right away. Look, she showed him a fan made of small strips. What's that? He didn't understand at first. You bought them yourself. She was almost jumping for joy. Tests? He grabbed a few, all of which had 2 strips on them. Call Grandma right away. Tell her to get ready. He grabbed her in an armful. I sense you're hungry, laughed Emma. Very much so. He kissed her. Grandma, if you last another 7 months, you'll be a great grandmother, Emma said quietly into the phone. This can't be. Come, I'm putting the goose in the oven, the woman almost shouted. We shall be in the evening. Emma shifted her gaze to her husband and kissed him with one lip.
I work as a journalist. My profession implies acquaintances and meetings with many different people. Unwittingly, I have witnessed a wide variety of destinies. Among all the stories, the most striking example of human transformation is Anthony's story. I was just starting my career as a journalist at the city television station. Sometimes, on my way out of work, at the nearest intersection I would meet a guy in a wheelchair, both legs missing. Anthony was in his 20s, begging for a living. What was it about him that caught my eye in the flow of people? Anthony had an interesting conversation with every passerby who gave him a few pennies. I was curious about what this guy was talking to passersby about. One day I approached him and put some money in his box. He thanked me and I smiled back. As I was about to leave, this guy stumped me with a question. Girl, please tell me, how can a guy like me succeed in life? I really want to live a full life, and I have no idea how to do it in my case. But I believe that there are much more kind people in the world, and they can help me with their advice. I was a little taken aback by the surprise. I looked at the guy carefully and saw his eyes burning. His eyes definitely said that he was not going to give up to the difficulties of his fate. I don't remember what I said to him, but he thanked me and said that I was a very interesting person and that Anthony would be happy to be like me someday. Such a touching confession was also the first time in my life that I had ever heard it. For the next few days, this guy's question never left my mind. I really began to think how a person with very limited abilities can achieve success in our difficult world. Since that day, the issue of personal and professional realization of disabled people has become one of the topical issues at my work. I prepared many stories on this topic. I'd asked Anthony's question to many successful and influential people. All of them responded with some general phrases about the need not to give up, to look for opportunities, and to apply to some organizations. But I knew for a fact that Anthony didn't mean that. Anthony meant not just some kind of employment. He was striving for full personal realization, which even not all absolutely healthy people can cope with successfully. For some time, I made it a habit to approach Anthony to slip him some money and tell him something that could be useful for him. But after a while, Anthony stopped showing up at the usual intersection. I looked for him in all parts of town, but I never saw him again. Life went on as usual. I was distracted by other issues, and the problems of the disabled gradually receded into the background. But every time I came across similar topics at work, I remembered Anthony, and it was really important for me to know how his fate turned out. The next time I met Anthony was when I had given up hope of finding him somewhere at a crossroads. I was invited to a business forum in a neighboring city. There were tons of entrepreneurs, bloggers, and journalists there. I gave a speech. The event went on with its dull program. Everyone was waiting for a coffee break, when you could finally find your acquaintances and chat with them on interesting topics. When I was pouring my coffee, an interesting-looking man came up to me. It was hard to tell his age. His eyes and face gave away a young man of about 30 to 35 years old. But his hair, evenly covered with grey, added a few extra years to his age. "Alice, what a nice meeting. You look beautiful," said the young man, smiling with a full mouth. I was doubly curious to know who this man was who knew my name before I met him. "Thank you. It's nice to meet you too. But unfortunately, I can't remember you. Perhaps you and I knew each other a long time ago. Please forgive me for my memory." "You don't have to apologize. It's really been a long time, almost 10 years. Back then, I was sitting in my wheelchair at a busy intersection begging. You're one of those rare people who were not indifferent to my inquisitive questions." I was pleasantly surprised to see Anthony so unexpectedly. We agreed to have dinner together after the event, and he agreed to gladly tell the whole story of his transformation. And yes, Anthony was no longer in a wheelchair. He walked leisurely on two legs with a cane in his hand. Over dinner, he told me some of his life story. Anthony was born into a family of ordinary laborers. When he was 8 years old, his parents were killed in an accident. Their house burned down, and his parents were left inside the house. Anthony was rescued. After his parents' funeral, he was handed over to his paternal grandfather. The grandfather tried to give his grandson everything he could in his situation. Anthony went to school, studied well, and dreamed of a sports career. Therefore, the grandfather found a way to pay for his sports sections from his meager pension. When Anthony was finishing school, his grandfather became very ill. He felt that his end was near. Anthony took care of his seriously ill grandfather alone. Grandpa had another son, Barry, in addition to Anthony's late father. Barry lived in a neighboring town and very rarely visited his father. One day, Grandpa himself called Barry and asked him to come to visit him in the evening. That evening, he sat Barry and Anthony down in front of him and had an important conversation. It was about an inheritance. His grandfather had a large house with a well-kept garden, and Barry had no place of his own. He and his 3 teenage children rented part of the house and picked up occasional part-time jobs. Neither Barry nor his wife were looking for something stable, so his grandfather willed the house to Barry. Anthony inherited his used foreign car. "Anthony, I don't think you'll mind. You'll go to the big city, make your career, and hardly want to live in our village. That's why I'm bequeathing my car to you," as grandfather explained his decision. Anthony had had an interest in his grandfather's automobile from the beginning, especially since it was the only one in the area. That was why he was very happy about it. He did not worry about housing, because he was really going to go to the city and build his future there. A couple months later, his grandfather said goodbye to his life. Right after his funeral, Barry and his family moved into his grandfather's house and began living there. Anthony quickly noticed that not only Barry himself, but also his wife Sarah, was abusing alcohol. Anthony began to look forward to the end of school so he could get out of here sooner. But on one of those days, tragedy struck. Anthony was involved in an accident with his grandfather's car. He was taken to the hospital in a serious condition and miraculously survived, but his legs could not be saved. Both legs below the knee were badly crushed. When Anthony woke up after a long coma, he could not believe what had happened for a long time. What kind of sports career can you dream of if you are now bedridden? Anthony was released from the hospital and had nowhere to go but Barry's house. Of course, the family was not at all happy about this addition to the house. Before the tragedy, Sarah and Barry, as well as Anthony himself, were looking forward to the end of the school year and going to town from Anthony. Now everything had changed and everyone had a new reality to accept. Anthony realized that he had no time for misery and depression. Already 3 days after his discharge, early in the morning, he rolled his stroller towards the big highway that leads to the nearest metropolis. Every morning, he got up at 5:00 a.m. and drove his wheelchair to this highway to catch a hitchhiker to the city. There were more opportunities for beggars in town. So Anthony spontaneously settled near the TV station building. It was important for him not only to get money for living, but also to get moral support from people. It was even more important to get advice on what direction to take in life and where to look for opportunities for success. Anthony had no idea in what field there might be opportunities for people like him. But that question never left his mind for a minute. So to every person who gave him a few pennies, he asked his pressing question: "Can you tell me what I should do, and what I should do next to get my life together?" Admittedly, not every passerby understood Anthony's question. For example, one middle-aged woman tossed some coins into a box, but responded to Anthony's question in a very unexpected way. "What kind of opportunities? Man, you gotta get down off your ass. What fulfillment? What success?" In this day and age, healthy people with college degrees can't make it in life. And you sitting in a wheelchair, dreaming of some kind of success. You should be thankful you're getting bread. Then quietly roll your wheels and be grateful for what you have. Anthony decided not to stay at the intersection any longer that day. He rolled his wheelchair to the nearest park and sat there until the next morning. He pondered the woman's words. No, he couldn't accept a miserable existence on the pennies tossed by random passers-by. He could hardly convince himself that the world did not rest on this unkind woman. The next day, he went back to his crossroads and continued his work. But there were some funny incidents. One day, Anthony passed by a group of young people. Girls and boys his age were having a lively argument. One of the girls slipped him some money. Anthony could not ask his usual question this time, because he was in unbearable pain. These young people reminded him of his friends and of his old, healthy self. Until just a short time ago, he could have just as noisy a time with them and argue about everything on the selenium. As the girl tossed the money, Anthony stared silently at the ground. The noisy group walked past, stopped a few meters away, then walked back to Anthony in a friendly manner. We're going to have a peaceful hike for the environment. After the hike, we're going to have a picnic outdoors. Would you like to join us? We'll take care of you," said one of the girls. Anthony agreed happily. One of the guys wheeled his wheelchair, and they headed for the main street of the town. After a while, there were a lot more people. There were journalists with cameras. Police officers appeared, looking menacingly at the growing crowd of people. When there were quite a few people, one of the guys shouted to everyone that they would now head down this street to the nearest park. The crowd moved forward, chanting slogans about protecting nature and the need to stop using many current household items. There were calls for some foreigners to stop engaging in industry in this city. They demanded to close down these enterprises and stop destroying forests. Some shouted about the terrible pollution of the rivers around the city. When such slogans were shouted, the police became active. They approached those who were shouting from behind, twisted their arms, and dragged them to the police cars that were parked along the road. Anthony noticed that the most ardent protesters were the very guys who had invited him here. In a few minutes, they were all taken into police cars. There was no one to roll Anthony's wheelchair. The remaining people were quickly dispersing themselves. Anthony pulled off to the sidewalk, decided to rest a bit, and then leisurely returned to his workplace. At that moment, two policemen approached him and asked him what the purpose of his being here was. Anthony told it like it was. The policeman rolled his wheelchair to one of their cars and told him not to go anywhere. They went somewhere else. The first squad cars filled with troublemakers started to leave. Two cops returned about a half hour later. They checked Anthony's ID, asked a lot of questions. Anthony answered all the questions as they were, without lying. Then one of them lifted Anthony out of his wheelchair and put him in the police car. The other at that time folded the wheelchair and loaded it into the car. The police car sped off. In a few minutes they were out of town. Anthony was afraid to ask where they were taking him. The policemen drove in silence, only occasionally answering their comrades on the radio. On the way, they turned off at a gas station. The car was stopped at the curb and the two policemen got out. They returned a short time later with bags in their hands. They continued on their way. It was only after a while that Anthony realized that the policeman had brought him home, and in the bag they had packed a set of groceries. They dropped Anthony off outside his house, handed him the bag, and drove away in silence. Anthony was worried about his new comrades who had been taken off the street today. But in the evening, he learned from the local news that they had been released home that evening. Anthony liked this experience of actively interacting with a large number of people. The next day, he returned to the intersection again and continued his business. Now, he had more topics of conversation with passers-by. However, still not everyone was ready to listen to him and give him advice as he expected. On one such day, a man in substantial clothing dropped two large bills into Anthony's alms box. Anthony thanked him and couldn't help but ask his pressing question. The man was interested in the guy. He asked Anthony a counter question. "What are you willing to do to succeed?" Admittedly, Anthony had never thought about it before. Now he was seriously thinking about it. "I'm not ready to hurt people. I'm not ready to do immoral things. I'm not ready to cheat or break the law. If it is necessary to do something within these limits, I am ready to give 100%, said Anthony. The man liked this answer very much. "My name is Michael. What's your name?" "Anthony. You and I are namesakes, I guess." "Listen, namesake, tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. I'll meet you at my office. Can you come to an address near here? You might have trouble getting into the building. There's no ramps. I'll alert security to help you get to my office. You call me beforehand," the man said and handed Anthony his card. It was clear from the business card that Michael was the head of a large company. Anthony was unaccountably pleased. In order not to miss tomorrow's important conversation, he decided not to go to his uncle's house in the village at all today. He stayed the night in the park again. The time was summertime, so his health was in no danger. The next day, Anthony rolled his baby carriage to the appointed place much ahead of time. He needed to call Michael, but how could he do that if he didn't even have a cell phone? He had to spend an hour looking for a kind person who could lend his cell phone for one call. That person turned out to be a nice girl. She was hurriedly leaving the building where the meeting with Michael was scheduled. Initially, Anthony was not going to ask for the girl's cell phone. He was embarrassed to do so. The girl was passing by when Anthony made his request to a young man his age, and the young man rudely responded and went on in his own direction. That girl heard the whole conversation. She stopped and approached Anthony. "Do you need to make a phone call?" "Please, you can talk on my phone." She shoved her phone at him. Anthony was happy, but at the same second, he was shocked by the fact that he had no idea where and what buttons to press on the girl's phone. The girl realized it at once. "Excuse me, let me help you dial." Anthony silently slipped the girl's business card. "Oh, so you're here to see our Chief Michael?" the girl asked in surprise. "Yes, it seems to him," Anthony muttered. By this time, he was obviously nervous and depressed. In addition, he felt infinitely vulnerable in the girl's presence. In general, ever since Anthony became an invalid, he had shunned female company. It bothered him to think that any girl might think about how pathetic he was. What he hated most of all was having to put up with that feeling. "So his number is in my phone. We'll call him now," the girl said, then clicked on her phone screen a couple times and shoved her phone back to Anthony. "I dialed his number. You can talk to him." After a couple of beeps, a voice in the phone rang out. "Yes, Selena, I'm listening. There's no ramps. I'll alert security to help you get to my office. You call me beforehand," the man said and handed Anthony his card. It was clear from the business card that Michael was the head of a large company. Anthony was unaccountably pleased. In order not to miss tomorrow's important conversation, he decided not to go to his uncle's house in the village at all today. He stayed the night in the park again. The time was summertime, so his health was in no danger. The next day, Anthony rolled his baby carriage to the appointed place much ahead of time. He needed to call Michael. But how could he do that if he didn't even have a cell phone? He had to spend an hour looking for a kind person who could lend his cell phone for one call. That person turned out to be a nice girl. She was hurriedly leaving the building where the meeting with Michael was scheduled. Initially, Anthony was not going to ask for the girl's cell phone. He was embarrassed to do so. The girl was passing by when Anthony made his request to a young man his age, and the young man rudely responded and went on in his own direction. That girl heard the whole conversation. She stopped and approached Anthony. "Do you need to make a phone call?" "Please, you can talk on my phone." She shoved her phone at him. Anthony was happy, but at the same second he was shocked by the fact that he had no idea where and what buttons to press on the girl's phone. The girl realized it at once. "Excuse me, let me help you dial." Anthony silently slipped the girl's business card. "Oh, so you're here to see our chief, Michael?" the girl asked in surprise. "Yes, it seems to him," Anthony muttered. By this time, he was obviously nervous and depressed. In addition, he felt infinitely vulnerable in the girl's presence. In general, ever since Anthony became an invalid, he had shunned female company. It bothered him to think that any girl might think about how pathetic he was. What he hated most of all was having to put up with that feeling. "So his number is in my phone. We'll call him now," the girl said, then clicked on her phone screen a couple times and shoved her phone back to Anthony. "I dialed his number. You can talk to him." After a couple of beeps, a voice in the phone rang out. "Yes, Selena, I'm listening." "Michael, good afternoon. It's me, your namesake from the intersection. You told me to call ahead. I'm outside your building." "I got it, Anthony. Stay there. They'll be right with you," Michael said and hung up. "Thank you so much, Selena," said Anthony. "You're welcome." Selena smiled. "Is this your first time to see him?" Selena asked with interest. "Yeah, it's my first time here. Yesterday, I asked him for some job advice. He invited me to his office." "Well, then you should definitely expect the best, because our boss Michael is a very kind man. He helps a lot of people, and I think he'll do something for you. Anyway, I wish you good luck, and I have to run," said the girl and ran further on her business. A couple of minutes later, two huge guys came out of the business center and headed towards Anthony. They lifted Anthony's wheelchair, then brought it into the room, called the elevator, and took it to one of the high floors. Before Anthony's eyes was a real bustling business space, young people sitting at computers, commercials with Michael's face on a big screen, magazines on racks, half-whispered conversations, and smiling faces. Anthony was led to a supervisor. He expected to see Michael in a leather chair behind a huge walnut desk, but in fact, it looked different. There were many desks in the large room, separated from each other by small partitions. Michael appeared to be sitting in one corner of this room. He talked to Anthony for a while about his life and his plans. Then he offered him a job in manufacturing. The job was to record the arrival and departure times of workers from the production area. Michael took his time explaining that this information was needed for each employee's payroll. Anthony gladly agreed. They agreed to start the following Monday. That day was still 4 days away. To Anthony, that time seemed like an infinity. Immediately after finishing his conversation with Michael, Anthony hurried home to his uncle's village. In his head, he envisioned his bright future. However, his jubilation was interrupted by the unexpected events that awaited him at home. Despite the fact that today took a long time to catch a car to the village, Anthony came home in high spirits. He was met on the doorstep by a tipsy Uncle Barry. Here comes our assistant uncle sounding affectionate. Usually he was gnarly to Anthony or could come up with a couple of phrases only when necessary. Anthony understood perfectly well that it was such a silent signal that he was superfluous in this house. And his wife Sarah didn't talk to him about anything at all. But today it seemed different. "Oh, hi, Anthony." Sarah echoed her husband from the kitchen. Anthony entered the kitchen in his wheelchair and saw the usual scene: a bottle of vodka, a few cut glasses and scraps of food. The children were playing outside as usual. Uncle Barry asked Anthony to the table. "You're a guy who's old enough. We can trust you with our most precious possessions. Sarah's parents invited us to stay with them for the summer. And here, there's a vegetable garden and an orchard. We need your hands to take care of the crops for the fall. Or we'll all have nothing to eat in the winter," said Uncle Barry like a man who cared about farming. "Anthony, how many times do you have to beg on the streets? And we are ashamed of you for walking the streets and begging. You'd better get out and do some gardening and Mother Earth will feed us all." Sarah sounded in a way that was totally unlike her. In the last year and a half that they had moved into their grandfather's house, neither Anthony nor any of the neighbors had ever seen the family take care of the farm, much less the vegetable garden. And that small amount of vegetables and herbs were planted by Anthony's incredible labor. And that was because he expected that in the near future he would live in this house. But soon it became clear that his uncle and his wife would not let him stay here for long. And today, apparently, something had changed in their plans. "You go ahead there, wrap up your business, and set yourself up to be the master of that house for the whole summer," said Uncle Barry. "I actually got myself a good job. I need to get on with my life, not be a burden to you," said Anthony. "What kind of a job is that?" Barry's on a roll. People with education and brains can't find a decent job in our country. "Where do you want to go?" Barry poured himself a full glass of vodka and held it in his hand. "They can promise you anything. You have no education. You have no experience. You have us, of course, but we're ordinary people too. So it's a simple matter to get you to work somewhere and then screw you for money. It's happening everywhere. My friend's niece also decided to make some money. She ended up being recruited into some obscene services. So then her mother had to run and pull her daughter out of this bondage. Who's going to run after you if you're in trouble?" Sarah was being the most caring person in the world. "I met the employer in person. He's a very big man. He has hundreds of subordinates. He said it was enough for me to sit at the computer and note the time each employee came and went," said Anthony. "Well, if that's the case, of course. Uncle and Auntie are little people. You can ignore their requests. They did get you out of that selenium though, didn't they? They nursed you back to life, and they're still nursing you today. But none of that matters when there are other big people in the world. Come on, you get on with your life. Gratitude isn't about you." Uncle Barry has now turned to pressure. Anthony sat staring at one point. Why did this family have plans at this particular time? If he fell for their entreaties now, he would miss the opportunity to get a decent job. If he didn't do it now, his uncle and his wife wouldn't let it go. And Anthony really does depend on them for a lot of things. He can't even get soap off the shelf on his own. Although, until today, these people have not really bothered to take care of Anthony. Eventually, The entreaties smoothly devolved into a heated argument. Barry and Sarah at some point stopped choosing their expressions and even turned to outright threats. Anthony even suggested that they lock up the whole house and go wherever they were going. He promised to live the summer in the backyard, arriving in the evenings and leaving in the mornings. For some reason, the relatives insisted that he stay home all the time while they were away. Anthony ran out of patience when his uncle turned to accusations against his late father. "You're already as selfish and stubborn as my brother was when he was alive. You couldn't get snow from him in winter either. You've got the same genes, and your nephew's gone the same way." Barry continued to resent him. "If you don't do what we want now, we'll have to be kinder to you too," Sarah said. Anthony knew what she was talking about. He had heard the phrase that an invalid in the house was an unnecessary burden many times. In the end, it was agreed that Anthony was choosing his new job and a new place to live. Without waiting until morning, Sarah, staggering from alcohol, threw Anthony's clothes and personal belongings out the window. Uncle Barry remained seated at the table in the kitchen, unable to stop himself from airing his grievances against his long-dead brother. Barry and Sarah's children were watching everything that was going on. With great effort packing his belongings into his old gin bag, Anthony spent the night in the backyard of the house. The next morning, in his usual routine, he headed to the intersection. He needed to make some money to get by until he got his first paycheck. No matter how hard it was from such an unworthy act of his relatives, Anthony was glad in his heart that he had made a choice in favor of his own decision. He spent the remaining few nights in his favorite park. There was definitely difficulty with the most basic of needs. Anthony had always had a craving for cleanliness, but life on the streets didn't allow for proper cleanliness. He had made an extraordinary effort to draw water from the irrigation fountains in the park and wash his face with it. As for the cleanliness of his clothes, he had no solutions. On the eve of his first day of work, Anthony failed to fall asleep on a park bench. He was anxious and kept imagining himself as part of a large team. The prospect of receiving his fair wages gave him a lot of anticipation. On his first day of work, he rolled his wheelchair to Michael's production area well ahead of the start time. Fortunately for Anthony, it was relatively easy to get around in and around the building with a wheelchair. There were ramps at the entrance, and then a fully automatic transfer from elevator to elevator. Anthony's workstation was at the very entrance where the turnstile stood. He had his own large desk and a modern computer. Behind the desk was a comfortable upholstered chair. On the first day of work, Michael himself introduced Anthony to the staff. "May I have your attention, please? This is our new employee, Anthony. Please love, honor, and respect. He will be sitting at the timekeeping desk. If you see that Anthony is having any difficulty in performing his duties, may you be honored to help your fellow employee. It strengthens our team's spirit, and it is very noble and humane," said Michael. After these phrases, Anthony got rid of unnecessary anxiety. The first week flew by unnoticed. Anthony began to gradually get to know all the members of the team. Most of them turned out to be very friendly and polite people, except for the two, Gold and Oliver. These guys were friends with each other and went out together all the time. They were even somewhat similar in their manners. Gold and Oliver had been skeptical of Anthony from day one, but for fear of Michael, they did not show their dislike. Anthony's workday started a little earlier than the other employees. In the evening, he would leave in his wheelchair to the park, spend the night there, clean himself up in the morning with water from the fountain, and be the first to arrive at work. The small amount of things he took from home, he kept at his workplace under his desk. He had a great deal of difficulty in elementary domestic matters, but none of that mattered to him now. He believed that he should not fill his head with petty domestic difficulties. He understood the most important thing. He needed to change something fundamental in his life, and everything else, including everyday matters, would work itself out within the framework of this fundamental change. At work, his favorite part was the morning. Every employee checked in with Anthony and waited for him to open the turnstile to enter the changing area. Food was produced here, so the controls were very strict. This morning had prepared him for an unexpected pleasant surprise. The workers at the control point had accumulated several people. Anthony tried to flag and pass everyone as quickly as possible. Each of them gave his name and surname. Anthony gave them the right to pass on. It was the turn of the next employee. Anthony did not take his eyes off the computer monitor, as he was still not well versed in this part of his job. "Next," said Anthony. A pleasant female voice sounded at the desk. Anthony looked up and saw in front of him the same girl who had kindly provided her cell phone to contact Michael about 2 weeks ago. Anthony had been glad then that such nice people worked here, but now it turned out he had forgotten about Selena. Do you work here too? Do you remember me? And did I ask you for the phone the other day?" Anthony seemed to lose control of himself and kept talking out of turn. "Yes, Anthony, I remember you. I even know we're colleagues now. The main thing is not to be afraid of anything, and you will succeed. If you've already marked me, I'll go now," said the girl with a charming smile and quickly left in one of the technical rooms. Anthony noticed that his mood had shifted in a completely different direction. It was as if he had been transported to another reality, where none of his problems existed, but only Selena with her divine smile and pleasant voice. The working days passed quietly and without much difficulty. Only Anthony did not leave the desire to keep Selena on the control point every morning as long as possible. To this end, Anthony made up different stories and jokes every night. In the mornings, he now strove to look as good as possible, to radiate cheerfulness and positivity. These feelings helped him not to emphasize his unbearably hard way of life and the incredible difficulties in maintaining himself. Another morning at Anthony's work, it didn't take long for Selena to show up. "I wondered why the sun was shining so brightly today. It turns out it's because you, Selena, are complementing its rays," said Anthony, leisurely making a mark in front of Selena's last name. "That's so nice of you, thank you," Selena said, not sparing her charming smile. But these moments in Anthony's life lasted only a few seconds. Selena, not staying long, quickly disappeared into the bustle of the production process. Gradually, these poetic moments at the checkpoint began to be noticed by other employees of the company. It soon became clear that Anthony had some work to do. He was not good friends with the computer and often confused buttons. It was always Selena who helped him out at times like that. He began to dread the day when Selena wouldn't be there for him and he would be left completely helpless. It didn't take long for such a day to arrive either. Selena had the day off. Right in the middle of the work moment, when almost half of the production workers were being checked, Anthony again lost the page where he should mark each employee. It was foresight that saved him. He didn't get lost, took out a pen and paper, and continued to write down the arrival time of each employee on the paper. The next day, when Selena came to work, he told her what had happened. Selena complimented him on his resourcefulness. She unobtrusively offered to teach some computer lessons in her spare time. Anthony agreed to this gladly. For the first class, they carved out the lunch hour of the same day. It turned out that Selena still had a talent for teaching. She explained the basics of computer literacy in a very accessible and understandable way. At that moment, the lunch break ended and all the employees began to return to their workplaces. Gob, who had disliked Anthony from the beginning, was now much more attentive to his activities. "What are you guys doing here?" Gob asked, approaching Anthony's desk. "We decided to study a little. Anthony is learning everything quickly. I think soon he won't have any disruptions like today," said Selena. "Well, that's interesting, because Michael has very strict requirements for every employee. When I wanted to invite my friend, he wouldn't take him because he was not computer literate, and somehow people got in even without those magical skills. Or didn't the boss know that? Gob asked. Gob, Anthony Michael hired him. Don't worry, he knows the ins and outs of this guy, and will fill in some gaps in no time. Selena tried to smooth things over. Gob looked at both of them skeptically. At that moment, his inseparable friend Oliver came up to him. They whispered something to each other and headed for their desks. But Anthony sensed that these guys weren't going to let it go. A few minutes later, Gob was leisurely changing in the locker room, talking to his co-worker Robert. Robert was a gnarly man. He answered all of Gob's questions briefly and was busy doing his own thing. Gob watched him carefully. When he stepped back to the large mirror near the closet, Gob discreetly took out Robert's wallet and put it on the shelf. Robert didn't notice anything. He hurriedly locked his closet and headed for his workplace. At the same time, at the other end of the production building, Oliver was tracking Anthony. He was darting from one end of the hallway to the other, pretending to be waiting impatiently for one of his co-workers. In reality, he was waiting for Anthony to step away from his desk so that he could realize his plan. When he realized that he was wasting his time here, he wrote to Gob about it. Gob promised to think of something and told him to keep waiting. He went to talk to another co-worker, the new guy Evan. Evan, hey, I have $1 million favor to ask of you. Gob spoke in a businesslike tone. Hey, what's up? Evan asked. He was also feeling the pressure from Gob and Oliver, and now that he'd talked about the request, Vanya's eyes lit up with hope that maybe he could get along with those guys. You need to run right now to Anthony, who's sitting out front, and tell him that he's been called to accounting. It's an emergency, Gob said. Evan immediately ran to carry out Gob's command. Anthony wondered why he might have been called to the accounting department. He left his workplace and rolled his wheelchair toward the elevator. Oliver was just waiting for this moment. He walked over to Anthony's desk, looked around, and quickly pulled out an old gym bag with his belongings. While no one was around, Oliver headed for the stairs that lead to the dressing room. Oliver didn't make it to the bag in time. He saw Michael at the other end of the hall, who had come out of the administrative area and was on his way to production. In his haste, he had to throw his bag on the floor outside the front door and pretend to head for the dressing room. Oliver waited around the corner until Michael left on the elevator. Then he went back for the bag, retrieved it from the floor, and carried it toward the dressing room. Now he dialed Gob's number, briefly informed him that the bag was in hand, and sat down to wait for him here. Gob was still gone. Since Michael had gone straight to the production area, he couldn't run straight to the dressing room. Oliver sat like that for several minutes. When he heard the cleaning lady's footsteps, he left his bag in the dressing room and headed for his workplace, while he and Gob went back to the dressing room to drop Robert's stolen wallet into Anthony's bag. Anthony had time to discover it was missing. In that bag, he kept other valuables besides his clothes, documents, a pen and paper, and his books. So he immediately started searching for his belongings. Anthony was embarrassed to tell anyone that he kept his entire fortune here. Gob and Oliver realized that their cunning plan had not yet been successfully implemented. But Gob decided not to miss the opportunity to get back at Anthony and seized the opportunity. Michael, remember I told you about my friend who wanted to work here too? You didn't hire him because he didn't know how to use a computer, did you? Gob asked. What do you mean by that? Michael answered him. And the new guy in the wheelchair, what's his name? Anthony, I think his name is. He doesn't know anything about computers. He writes everything down on paper, but he got here somehow. How'd he get so lucky? Gob was still going on. You should check his work more closely, because he's absent a lot. Anyone can come and go as they please, Oliver chimed in. Michael looked over and saw that Anthony was indeed absent. Anthony was frantically searching for his gym bag. The sound of a wheelchair being moved was heard by the cleaning lady, and she asked what he was doing in the tech area. Anthony told her about the loss of his gym bag. You should have asked. I saw how your companions moved their personal belongings into the check room. Come on, I'll show you," said the cleaning lady and rolled his wheelchair into the dressing room. Anthony's gym bag was indeed there. How? How did she get here?" asked Anthony with surprise. "Where's it supposed to go?" The cleaning lady's got her hands full. "Generally, everyone keeps their personal belongings here. But yours appeared here only today, and that was brought by your comrades. Maybe you just didn't know it." "Oh, right. I didn't know that. Now I will," Anthony said and felt embarrassed for his panic. In fact, he really didn't know that there was a special place to store his things and that it was much safer there. True, he had forgotten to specify who the kind companions were who had moved his things here. After receiving a few lessons from Selena, Anthony felt not only great love, but also universal gratitude towards her. He really wanted to do something nice for her in return. He began to look forward to the end of the month, when he would finally receive his first paycheck, and he would be able to make a gift to Selena. But until that day, Anthony was once again faced with a series of challenges. During this time, Anthony learned that Selena's mom also worked at this company as an accountant. Anthony thought that it would not be unreasonable to get acquainted with Selena's mother and establish a good relationship with her. But this woman very rarely appeared at the production area. Anthony still tried to come to work first, and no one was ahead of him. He was still frantic about problems with his work computer. On one such day, the computer unexpectedly failed him again. When he turned it on, it ran completely incomprehensible programs and did not respond to Anthony's attempts to do anything about it. Again, it all happened on the day Selena was away. He had to get a pen and paper out again and write down the times the employees visited. Gob and Oliver weren't going to let that go. "Anthony, I don't think being a computer buddy is your thing. You should do something simple, where you don't have to use your brain," Gob said and laughed. "You're going to break that computer so soon, and then you'll spend half your life working off the cost of it," Oliver echoed him. Anthony was really scared. He dialed Selena's number and told her that something was wrong with his computer again. Selena advised him to find Max, the system administrator, in the administrative area and ask him to help him. Anthony had to go to great lengths to find Max. He came and identified the problem at a glance. "Well, buddy, I guess you've been playing games in the workplace. Your computer is infected with a virus. Such problematic viruses can only be picked up on gaming sites," said Max. "But I don't even know how to play on a computer," Anthony muttered. "Don't get too carried away. There's a camera behind you." Max pointed to a corner of the ceiling right behind Anthony's back. This was another revelation for Anthony. He really didn't realize that his every action was being watched. On the other hand, it gave him hope to prove his innocence. On one such challenging day, Anthony is approached by one of his co-workers whom he doesn't yet know. "So, how's it going? How's work going?" asked the young man. "Thank you, I'm settling in," replied Anthony. "Have you made any friends here?" the unfamiliar colleague asked. Anthony didn't understand the question, but he answered honestly. "My best friends here so far are Selena and Michael. With the other co-workers, we're still in a formal relationship. You should be more careful anyway. My name's Billy, and I'm a security guard here. I know every move every employee makes here, so don't ignore what I say." Billy looked at Anthony enigmatically and slowly went back to his workplace. Already seated behind several large screens, Billy's security guard called the production area and asked the two employees to report to the security office immediately. Gob and Oliver were somewhat surprised, but "Don't lie, the camera in the hallway records everything with sound. You hatched a plan yesterday to frame the new guy in the wheelchair," said Billy. "Either you tell it like it is now, or the sound recording will serve as evidence of your theft in court." Oliver was more than a little frightened. He recounted the plan that Gob had suggested yesterday without much difficulty on Billy's part. Afterward, Billy gave a warning and let Oliver go. He then asked Gob to come in. "When are you gonna put Robert's wallet back where it belongs?" Billy's guard turned to Gob. "There was a misunderstanding, because we have very similar wallets, and I think I got my shelf mixed up with Robert's. I'll be sure to give him his wallet back as soon as I see him." He was sure that he had covered the camera well enough with his back, and his actions would not be seen by the guards. As it turned out, it was impossible to hide anything from Billy. "No, either you go and hand over your wallet right now, or Michael will see the tape of you stealing it. Then you'll be summarily fired. That's the best option, unless Robert decides to file a police report on you," said Billy's security guard. Billy this time decided to turn a blind eye to the stupidity of the young boys. But their devious plans didn't end there. Billy guessed it too, so he decided to warn Anthony. The end of the month was approaching. On one such day, a pleasant middle-aged woman approached Anthony. "Anthony, is that you? I need a monthly time schedule for payroll," said the woman. Anthony turned the monitor of his computer and put a stack of papers next to it, where he wrote down the schedule by hand. "What kind of joke is this?" the woman exclaimed. "Do I have to make a monthly schedule myself? I won't accept it like this. You have exactly 2 hours to enter all these papers on the computer and submit them to me," the woman said and left. Anthony began the work process. No matter how hard he tried, he realized that he was running out of time. In his haste, he pressed the wrong button again, and again his work stalled. While he was trying to fix the problem, the bookkeeper came down to him again and demanded the schedule at the ready. "Jessica, so our coworker crashes this computer every day. Maybe it makes sense for him to actually work manually." Gob showed up from somewhere and started commenting on everything. "How does it break? I thought he didn't enter the data because of a network glitch." Jessica waved her hands. "You can ask your daughter Selena how many times she's helped him out. Last time, Max spent half a day digging around to get his computer up and running. I think it's already broken." Oliver ended up here with his comment too. "Well, if the computer does seem broken, Anthony will work it out of his paycheck," said Jessica. "Yeah, 3 months without a paycheck, and he could close his damage to the company." Anthony and Oliver chuckled among themselves. The time was approaching evening, and Anthony had not yet finished making the time schedule. The employees, who were preparing to receive their paychecks today, began to whisper among themselves. Some of them managed to go up to the accounting department and find out the reason for the delayed paycheck. Of course, the accounting department said that the paycheck was delayed because of Anthony's slowness and irresponsibility. Anthony decided to stay the night and finalize the schedule. During this time, Gob and Oliver stood near his workplace and told each employee the reason for the delayed paycheck. Colleagues who had recently been courteous had instantly turned into embittered and violent people. Someone even threatened to complain to Michael and ask him to fire Anthony for not doing his job. Seeing all this commotion, Selena came to Anthony's rescue again. She too stayed late after work and helped to finalize the work schedule. "My mom at work is only so stern," said Selena. "She's actually a very kind person. Don't worry about the computer and all that stuff about you breaking it and working it off your paycheck. It's a common practice around here to keep the employees on their toes." Selena tried to calm Anthony down. After finishing the chart, Selena decided to take it with her and give it to her mother at home. "Don't worry, everyone will get their paychecks by lunchtime tomorrow and forget everything. And you should be careful with your computer, because someone has put viruses on it, right?" Selena said lastly. Indeed, Anthony's co-workers stopped hissing and getting angry at him after they received their paychecks. After lunch, Michael called Anthony over to him. He said that he had noticed Anthony's absence from the workplace several times and asked why that was the case. Anthony had to honestly tell the reasons for each time he had been excused from the workplace. He was now unable to hide the fact that he was actually living on the streets and had to deal with domestic issues at the workplace at times. Anthony revealed that he had to leave home the day he made the choice to take the job. Michael listened to everything carefully and felt sorry for the guy. He ordered that he was given a small corner in one of the technical rooms. Now Anthony lived at work. The conditions were much better than on the street, but he was terribly ashamed of it. But it was not the biggest problem in his life at that moment. All the hardships and problems were forgotten in the blink of an eye when Anthony remembered Selena. He never ceased to wonder how such a beautiful girl could be so kind and intelligent. Could it be that she had a crush on him too? Anthony was afraid to think about it, because he did not believe in the reciprocity of his feelings. What kind of healthy, beautiful and young girl could love a wheelchair-bound invalid and absolutely unsettled in life? These thoughts made him put his declaration of love for Selena on hold for a while. One of these days, as usual after the end of the working day, all the employees hurriedly went home. Gob and Oliver were among the first to leave. Today, Gob was in an upbeat mood. He left the workplace first and returned a few minutes later, but with a beautiful bouquet in his hands. Anthony didn't pay attention to such details at first, but Gob had gotten his way. "Anthony, is Selena out yet or not?" Gob asked. "Not yet. Do you think she'll like the bouquet?" Gob lifted the bouquet in front of Anthony's eyes and began to show all sides. Well, the bouquet was indeed magnificent. "Is it for Selena?" Anthony found himself at a loss. "Yeah, who else would it be for?" "Not for you. Selena's the best-looking girl here. I've got big plans for her, and I hope I get lucky tonight," Gob said, showing off his unpleasant, boorish smile. Anthony felt like he'd been splashed with cold water. How could it be? Selena was so refined, so well-mannered and quiet. This Gob is completely out of her league. He's boorish, rude, and seems completely incapable of deep feelings. Anthony didn't want to believe that. He hoped that Selena herself realized that this guy was no match for her and would soon fight back against this boorish Gob. A couple minutes later, Selena came out with a flying gait. She smiled charmingly at Anthony as usual and wished him a good evening. And after a few steps, she threw herself into the arms of that clumsy Gob. After hugging, the couple got into Oliver's car and drove off to an unknown destination. Anthony lost pace from that day forward. Several months had passed. Anthony had become quite familiar with his job and was already able to instruct others, and "I get it. You don't have to justify yourself. I'm sorry if I was inappropriate with my feelings." There was an uneasy pause. Selena had a really hard time choosing phrases so as not to offend Anthony, and at the same time not to feed him false hopes. Anthony realized this too, and managed to turn the conversation to other topics. They never returned to the subject again. Anthony's goal now was to forget this girl. He didn't want to live an illusion anymore. True, it was difficult to do this when Selena was constantly in front of his eyes. Selena, in turn, also tried to somehow smooth over this difficult issue. She knew that Anthony was always reading books. A couple days after the conversation at the coffee shop, she gave him a stack of new books. They were all motivational in nature. Anthony liked this gift very much. The focus of his attention gradually began to shift from Selena and Gob to himself. Suddenly he remembered that he knew how to use the internet. Selena had taught him, especially now he had a modern cell phone that could transmit everything in the world. On one of these days, he has a dream. In this dream, he sees himself as a little boy. Anthony's parents were alive and by his side. Anthony sits between them in a green clearing. There is a thick layer of snow lying around, but it quickly begins to melt under the rays of the bright sun. Anthony and his parents are trying to make out a flock of birds flying through the sky. Anthony is sure that these birds will bring something important to him. The flock suddenly begins to land not far from his family. Screams could clearly be heard. Anthony could even make out their coloring. The birds have now completely surrounded him. Anthony keeps waiting for them to drop off their gift, but instead they swirl around his parents and take them both into the sky. Anthony screams after them, cries, and runs to the edge of a high cliff. But the pack has already disappeared behind the mountains without a trace. Anthony realizes he is lost. He finds himself in a completely unfamiliar area. Only in the distance, he sees a crowd of hard-working people. Now he decides to get to these people and ask for help. But suddenly he finds himself as he is now without both legs, and the wheelchair is not around. So Anthony crawls towards the people. Suddenly someone in the crowd comes running towards him. He's holding a small piece of paper in his hand. The unknown man hands Anthony this small paper and immediately disappears. Along with him, the crowd of working people has disappeared. Anthony unfolds the small folded paper and sees the address of a certain website. Toward morning, he woke up in a cold sweat. The dream was so vivid that he remained impressed for a long time. The address of the webpage remained clearly in his memory. The first thing he did in the morning was to type in the address, and he was truly amazed. It was the website of a company that makes prosthetic limbs for the disabled. Anthony connected this dream with his impressions from motivational books. One of them said that if the universe heard you, it would definitely signal you to take action. This was exactly the case. Now he has a new dream and a new goal to earn money for prosthetics. Yes, it's a lot of money. Yes, he will have to work hard to learn to walk on these prostheses, but he will live a full life. The next day, Anthony decided to meet with Michael. He told him that he had set new goals for himself and asked what he needed to do to increase his salary. Michael, as usual, did not disappoint Anthony. He helped compile a long list of training courses, skills, and abilities that would help Anthony reach a new level of competence at his job in the near future. So Anthony went to take a short accounting course. Of course, new knowledge, especially professional knowledge, was given to him much more difficult than computer literacy in the hands of the lovely Selena. But Anthony decided not to give up. It is still difficult for him to get to his place of study. It was still difficult to cope with elementary tasks, but he had no intention of stopping. Working days continued in the usual rhythm. Anthony could not forget Selena. She is constantly in front of his eyes. The day begins with a meeting with her, ends by seeing her home with a look. She is increasingly leaving with God. God has long noticed that Anthony is partial to her and does not miss any opportunity to demonstrate that Selena belongs to him. He's also nice to Jessica the accountant, his potential mother-in-law, and he's been doing quite well in that area. Jessica, who used to be good to Anthony, had become cold to him lately. Anthony didn't notice it right away. That day, out of habit, he was in a hurry to turn in his timesheet for the month. He took the elevator to Jessica's office and knocked. "Jessica, good morning. I'm all set. Come on in." Anthony rolled his wheelchair with great difficulty to the accountant's desk and put the papers on the table. Jessica first looked at the papers, then glanced at Anthony. "What's the rush? You're always in a hurry. You have a strong desire to please everyone, and it's going to play tricks on you. I didn't tell you before, but you have 100 mistakes in every document." Jessica said it with undisguised irritation. "What about the mistakes? Why didn't you tell me right away?" Anthony was surprised. "Because I've been fixing everything myself. I thought you'd start getting into your work. I hoped you'd be good at it, but you're not." "Anthony, it's really hard for you. Maybe you should think about doing something else. I've heard you can make a good living shining shoes in the underpass. I think you wouldn't have any problems there," said Jessica. Anthony staggered back. He felt like he'd been splashed with cold water again. Jessica had always supported and praised him before. But what had happened now? Why had she decided to hurt him so badly, so bluntly suggesting that the best life for him was the street? Anthony realized that it wasn't about the papers at all. So he didn't argue, left the papers on the desk, and rolled his wheelchair back to his workplace. After such hard days at work, Anthony usually distracts himself with his motivational books. They allow him to paint in his head a whole new life where he is a complete and accomplished person. Only within this image can Anthony dream of the most important, loving, and beloved loved ones. He is sure that in his current position, no one needs him. Indeed, every person in his life, sooner or later by his actions, makes this clear. The exception so far is Michael, and Selena, of course. Although she could not love Anthony, but she did not deprive him of her friendly support. Anthony realizes that even these people cannot endlessly provide him with their care and understanding. The worst part is, someday these people might also hint that Anthony is giving them trouble. Then he will definitely lose meaning and direction in his life. The new work week started with positive news for the team. Everyone was discussing the news that God proposed to Selena. She accepted his proposal, and they scheduled the wedding in the coming days. And at lunchtime, Gob officially made an announcement to the whole team. They have decided to play a modest wedding for the closest people, then plans to organize a gala dinner for all colleagues in the company canteen. After that, he and Selena have a plan to start their joint vacation, which they will spend in Egypt on a wedding trip. Everyone applauded and congratulated the newlyweds. Anthony couldn't do that. It was too painful for him. He realized that the darkest days awaited him at work. Starting the next day, the hot topic for the team was the topic of a gift for the newlyweds. The next morning, when all the employees crowded around Anthony's desk and to mark their names, Gob attracted the crowd's attention with his statement. "We promised we'd have a wedding surrounded by the people closest to us. Anthony, you're like a friend of the family. Here's an invitation for two, and you can bring a friend," Gob said, and put the beautiful wrapping on the table. It was an additional blow to Anthony. He didn't go to the wedding, of course. That day, when Gob and Selena were having a tea party for the whole staff, he made up a false excuse to take a couple of hours off from work. He spent that time in the park. Selena was well aware of all this. Gob also noticed Anthony's fidgeting and continued to act in the same way. In the evening, when all the employees were going home, Jessica had a conversation with Anthony. "You were invited to the wedding, but you didn't show up. You weren't at the tea party today either, and Selena was looking for you." "Yes, I've been a bit busy," Anthony muttered. "Yeah, you've been getting a lot of business lately." Jessica took another jab for a reason unknown to Anthony. As usual, Gob was right there. "Jessica, I told you our Anthony has a career dream. He's working day and night, aiming for the top job. Look at him, studying accounting, and he's already sucking up to you," Gob said, pointing to the stack of books on Anthony's desk. Now Anthony's mind was making sense of everything. He remembered when Gob was always trying to see what he was studying at his desk all day. Apparently, Gob had gotten there and peeked at the textbooks. He decided to use that against Anthony and made up a story about him going straight for Jessica's accountant's job. At the same time, Gob used it as an excuse to woo his potential mother-in-law. Anthony was devastated by the meanness. The only true option in his case was not to react to all these attacks. He himself did not notice that he had already learned a little to withstand such situations. But the fact that people can do you evil in advance, even when you do not intend anything against them, was difficult to digest. Anthony had to go through this lesson alone. The next morning, all the production workers were surprised by Anthony's absence from the workplace. In the last 6 months since he had gotten a job here, there hadn't been a single day that Anthony hadn't and sat at his desk the very first. Lily's security guard asked everyone to self-check in on paper and leave everything on the desk. After that, Billy rushed to the technical room where Anthony lived in one corner. He was lying in bed almost unconscious and did not react to Billy's attempts to wake him up. "Anthony, goddammit. Michael's gonna be at work any minute now. If he catches you drunk, You're out of here like a bullet. He won't even care that you're an invalid. Wake up." When Billy realized that his attempts were futile, he simply locked the door from the outside and left. Billy told all the curious people that Anthony felt sick and decided to drive his wheelchair to the drugstore to get some medicine. It was not long before Billy regretted that such an explanation was inappropriate. His version did not stand up to any criticism. It was getting close to lunchtime, and Anthony wasn't going to open his eyes. Billy was already annoyed beyond belief. "Anthony, are you an idiot? Do you realize you're setting me up? Now, get the hell up and go back to your desk. Michael's been here a long time. He could be wondering about you any moment." Billy shook Anthony's woozy body. Having never tasted alcohol before, Anthony decided to find solace in a bottle after yesterday's events. He certainly succeeded in venting his emotions. He sat in the park and sobbed loudly until the police noticed him. They approached him and were about to take him to the police station for violation of public order. But then, out of nowhere, an unknown middle-aged woman appeared. She started cursing Anthony. "There you are. As soon as I went to get bread, those damned comrades dragged him out into the street." A woman acquaintance further told the police that it was her son, that he had recently been in a car accident, had lost both his legs, and that he was now in a deep depression. She took all the blame, saying that she had allowed her son to spend some time in the company of his companions, and those unreasonable had given him alcohol. The woman begged the police not to take her son away and promised that it would not happen again. The policeman believed the woman's words and drove away. The woman then asked who he was and what he was doing here. Anthony told his story. The now unfamiliar woman cried with him. Lastly, he asked her to help roll the stroller to his work. The unfamiliar woman escorted Anthony out. Lily's security guard, seeing Anthony drunk, also wanted to send him away, but he was aware of all the drama going on in the group with Anthony's participation. So he let the drunken invalid sleep in his corner, and now he can't wake him up. Later, Michael was really interested in where Anthony was walking around. Billy kept saying that he had gone to the drugstore. The time was nearing evening when Anthony opened his eyes with great difficulty and looked at his watch. And then he remembered his work, but the door was locked. He started banging on the door with all his might. Billy's security guard, whose workplace was at the other end of the building, couldn't hear the banging. Michael, however, was passing by. He went to the door, reached for the handle, and asked, "Anthony, what kind of trick is that? Who locked you in here? We've been waiting all day for you." "I'm sorry, Michael. I promise it won't happen again. I swear to you by all the saints. I showed weakness yesterday, but it was the first and last time." Michael seemed to realize what had happened and called Billy's security guard. Billy by this time was ready to confess that he had been misleading everyone all day and lying to save Anthony. Michael later sat Anthony and Billy down in his office and asked what punishment they thought would be fair for their transgression. They both made excuses and repented, but Michael had never forgiven his employees for drinking on the job, and for untruthfulness, he simply went into a rage and always fired employees without a second thought. And this time, despite all other circumstances, he did not reconsider his principles. Thus, Anthony and Billy found themselves unemployed in a matter of minutes. Anthony became most resentful of Billy. He practically begged Michael to keep Billy and fire him, but he was adamant. By evening, they had both received their paychecks from Jessica and were putting their mugs in their travel bags. "Billy, I feel terrible about what happened. I don't even know how to make it up to you. You did the manly thing to me, and it let you down." Anthony was now racked with guilt. "Come on, it's no big deal. I was thinking of quitting myself. They offered me a good job the other day, and I was hesitant. Maybe I belong in the new place. We'll see how things play out." Billy said in a calm tone, "I'm all right. I've got my hands and feet. I live with my mother. She feeds me, does my laundry, and cleans up. What are you gonna do? Lily asked. I'll probably go to the park. Where else would I go? Said Anthony. How can you live on the street? Come to my place. My mother is kind. She won't kick you out. You don't plan to live like this all your life, do you? Finish your studies, get a new job, and figure out a place to live, Billy said. Anthony had his doubts. He is very afraid of making other people uncomfortable. After he was fired from his job, he felt doubly bad. Even though he felt gratitude to a person, he could show himself in a moment of weakness. But he had already promised 1,000 times that he would never drink alcohol again under any circumstances. Billy's mother received Anthony without much joy. Lucy, in spite of her advanced age, worked from morning till evening, in between managing to create a cozy home and feed her grown-up son Billy. At dinner, she inquired about Anthony's future plans. He frankly admitted that he didn't see any job prospects until he finished his accounting course. Lucy even praised him for his determination, but between phrases she made it clear that strangers were not particularly happy about such a burden in the house as Anthony's limited movement. Anthony realized that very soon he would have to deal with housing problems again. And the time was already fall. The nights in the park were not as comfortable as in summer. In the morning, a rational idea came to him. He decided to offer Lucy a certain amount of money for temporary residence in their apartment. Lucy did not refuse such an offer and gave him a separate crib in Billy's room. A few days later, Billy actually went to a new place where he was offered a job. He was taken there without any problems. Billy liked the new job. He still didn't have to work hard, but the salary was much higher. Anthony continued to go to school. When there was not much left before graduation, Anthony suddenly realized that he did not communicate with his classmates. They are very intelligent, evolved, and determined people. Plus, they must be just as driven as Anthony. From the first day, each of them tries to support Anthony in every way possible, helping him to get to and from the classroom. A close acquaintance with any of them has not yet taken place due to Anthony's fixation on himself. And so he finally got to talk to some of them today. Angelica, a young girl, works as a secretary and is also aiming for growth in her company. Alexandra, who looks to be in his early 60s, turned out to be the head of his own company. Leslie said that she was tired of working as a school teacher and decided to change her field of activity. Indeed, everyone turned out to be very interesting people. If there was free time after school, Anthony did not hurry home. He drove his wheelchair away from the place of study to crowded places and continued begging to cover his current expenses. He still asked passers-by about the secrets of success in life. He was surprised to find that he now spoke to people in a slightly different tone. Whereas before he had felt deeply depressed, self-pitying, and hopeless, he could now talk about himself more calmly. What he enjoyed most was telling people that he was studying to be an accountant, that he had a goal to put himself on his feet, literally. Some young people even had time to take pictures with him or video the whole thing. All in all, life had found a certain stability. On one of these days, Billy was also happy. He announced that he had received his first increased salary and could afford a small party in a small circle, meaning Anthony's company. Anthony did not attach much importance to the suggestion. Billy promised to return to the subject when Lucy went away to the country for a couple of days the other day. And that day didn't take long to arrive. When Anthony arrived in the evening with a decent part-time job, Billy had already set a fancy bachelor's table and was waiting for him. Anthony remembered in his promise to never take alcohol in his mouth again. Billy had talked him into it for a long time, but Anthony was resistant to persuasion. By the time passed midnight, Billy was almost drunk. He occasionally spouted insults at Anthony, but overall their party was fun. At that moment, Billy had a brilliant idea. Look, why are we bored alone together? We could brighten up the evening with some lovely ladies, don't you think?" said Billy, smiling enigmatically. "Well, if the lovely ladies won't be disappointed by the presence of a special person like me, I don't mind. And I won't rat on Lucy about you," Anthony said. Billy went out on the balcony and dialed the phone number of the beautiful ladies he knew, whom he periodically visited. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and Billy went to open the door. Ariana and Samantha turned out to be quite pleasant girls. They were relaxed, happy to drink and laugh at Billy's anecdotes. After a while, one of them suggested a disco, but after a few minutes, the neighbors knocked on the door and asked for silence. The disco was cancelled, and Billy was already tired. He offered Samantha and Anthony to spend the night in the living room, while he went to his room with Ariana. Anthony offered Samantha a place on the couch, and he himself laid the mattress on the floor. A philosophical conversation ensued between them. "Even though I'm not doing my best work right now, I wouldn't want to lose faith in myself. I convince myself every day that it's only temporary. I have to pay for my studies at any cost. I have no one to take care of me, no parents. So in a way, you and I are alike." Samantha talked about her difficult fate. "I'm not judging you. Everyone makes their own choices. You get paid money to entertain single men. It's not the worst thing a man can do. The main thing is that you be careful, choose your people, and always look for an opportunity to leave this business as soon as possible." Anthony tried to support the girl. In the morning, when Anthony woke up, no one was in the apartment. He called Billy and found out that he had been at work for a long time. There was no trace of last night's fun in the kitchen. Billy, before leaving for work, had managed to wash all the dishes, put everything in its place, and take out the trash. By the time Lucy arrived, the apartment was in perfect order, but it was only an appearance. Anthony noticed that over the past few days, Lucy had become cold to him. He couldn't understand the reason, but it didn't take the woman long to puzzle it out. That evening at dinner, she asked, "I see." Lucy was in no hurry to leave. She invited him to breakfast and was the first to start the conversation. "Anthony, I realize you're going through a difficult time. There's all sorts of things in life. There's need, there's hardship. I wonder if you could tell me more about what happened in my absence." Anthony understood what he was talking about. "Lucy, I'm very sorry that your personal valuables were lost. I can tell you one thing for sure. It was definitely not my fault." Anthony hurried to get out of this unpleasant conversation as quickly as possible and still persuade Billy to tell the truth. Lucy, of course, was not satisfied with the answer, but Anthony could not change Billy's mind either. "Don't worry, Anthony. Mother will forget in time. She never wore that jewelry. As for the money, well, it was a couple thousand, that's all. I'll make it up from my paycheck," Billy said on the phone. But Anthony had a feeling this was going to end badly, and today's studies were much more interesting. Approaching the end of the course, the teacher Elizabeth asked the students about their future plans for self-realization in the field of accounting. Everyone told about their plans. Only Anthony had only hopes. He honestly admitted that he had great doubts about employment and that he was setting himself up for a difficult path in advance. After class, Elizabeth asked Anthony to stay late. She said that her daughter, as a student, was volunteering in the field of disabled people and their adaptation in society. She promised to talk to her daughter about Anthony's situation. She might be able to offer some advice. Anthony thanked her profusely, but in his friend's apartment, he was already in for an unpleasant surprise. Someone had gone through all his things and scattered them all over the room. Obviously, the person was looking for something and didn't find it. Anthony immediately realized that it was Lucy who was angry. He now had no doubt that she suspected him of stealing jewelry and money. Anthony didn't wait for Billy to return from work. He gathered all of his personal belongings with great difficulty, put them in his gin bag, left a final thank you note on the desk, and headed toward the familiar park bench. It was noticeably colder at night. In addition, The park had become crowded with drunks and debauchees. Anthony was worried about his last savings, which he hid not in his pockets, but in a makeshift stitching in the inside of his clothes. And it was a skill that life had taught him. As the time passed midnight, the cold became unbearable. The rain began to drizzle. Anthony didn't want to get sick at such a difficult moment, so he decided to break his promise. At the nearest supermarket, he bought a small bottle of alcohol and drank it. Next, he decided to stay up all night to stay warm. Instead, he decided to repeat by heart the knowledge he had learned in the course. For this, he did not go unnoticed by two policemen. Seeing a drunken cripple in a wheelchair, the policemen did not ask a lot of questions, loaded him into their car, and brought him to an institution. At this establishment, he was questioned in detail about everything, his documents were checked, and he was brought to a small room where there were several other men with disabilities of different ages. Anthony only realized then that he had been taken to a shelter for the disabled. He liked it here. Now he has his own bed with clean linens again. The residents are fed 3 times a day. During the day, they have physical training, do some simple intellectual activities, and most importantly, people with disabilities find understanding company here. The residents were very curious. Anthony noticed that here people don't talk much about their past, but they can finally dream together freely, discuss their plans, and give each other useful advice. His new friends praised Anthony for his eagerness to learn a challenging new profession. Here came the day of the end of the course. All trainees were presented with certificates of completion and wished success in their realization. At parting, Elizabeth told Anthony that her daughter wanted to talk to him. Anthony gave his phone number and began to look forward to the call. Cecilia called the same evening. Anthony, good evening. My mother Elizabeth told me about you. I, in turn, have told my friends about you. Some of them are interested in meeting you in person. Write down your address and please come by Tuesday morning at 11 o'clock. Ask for Harvey. He'll be waiting for you there. Anthony thanked Cecilia profusely and now looked forward to Tuesday. It was only half a day away. Harvey turned out to be a pleasant young man about Anthony's age. He gave me a little tour to start with. The most progressive representatives of our youth gather here. Most of them are still students and even school children. But all of us are united by one thing, to believe in our dreams and to go to them. And when there are like-minded people around, it is easier to achieve your goals, isn't it? Harvey talked about everything with enthusiasm. Indeed, in various offices, young people were working at large tables, some of them discussing their projects. In the cozy kitchen, there was also a group of young people sitting around, discussing ideas over a cup of coffee. Anthony's eyes lit up. As a child, he had dreamed of working in such a modern building and surrounded by such energetic people. Anthony, we're told you took a course in accounting. I'd like to offer you the position of Assistant Chief Accountant. In this position, you will be able to learn the practical aspects without too much responsibility. Our company is interested in the growth and development of its employees. If you are interested, we will be happy to involve you in other projects over time. Anthony agreed without a second thought, and indeed, the team turned out to be very progressive. There wasn't a single person on the team who would plot against Anthony like Gob had done in his previous job. True, Anthony still had to make incredible efforts, but he saw their result. He was gradually moving towards success. Anthony has been working at his new job for 3 months now and is very happy with his new life. His dream of prosthetic legs is getting closer and closer. He continued to live in a shelter for the disabled. One day, Harvey called Anthony to his place and started an interesting conversation. Anthony, I see how hard you're working. I'd also know you have an important goal. If you've noticed, everyone on this team is committed to thinking outside the box. I'd encourage you to take a closer look at that approach. You can accelerate your dreams. And besides, your life doesn't end with prosthetics. It starts there. You need to want more, Then you'll reach your current goals much faster. Anthony didn't really understand what Harvey was talking about, but Anthony liked his words and his vision of life very much. Have you never thought about starting your own business? Harvey asked. This is my wildest dream, only it's behind another dream. I can only begin to take decisive action by being able to walk on my own. You're still thinking in patterns. I would suggest that you ask the people who live with you in the shelter what they would like most. I already know they want a full life. Only for some of them it will remain a dream, said Anthony. In this case, you should strive to bring their lives as close to their dreams as possible. I think you'll find a better solution, said Harvey. For several days afterward, Anthony thought about these phrases. After much thought, he came to the conclusion that the suggestion to make life easier for other disabled people had a valuable basis. Anthony began researching various stories on the internet. He found many examples of people who unexpectedly lost the opportunity to live a full life and eventually found an opportunity to grow from it. Anthony decided to seriously engage in the development of various adaptations and household devices for the disabled. Studying different materials, he noticed that such things are produced only in some countries. Because of that, their cost in other countries is very high. When Anthony studied this issue even more deeply, it became clear that the production of such products does not require anything fantastic. Everything is made of ordinary materials. Now he hurried with his idea to Harvey. Harvey found the idea brilliant and asked the other guys on the team to help Anthony develop his own business plan. Who's going to give me money for my business? I have no experience. I have no assets to guarantee any compensation. Anthony continued to be in doubt. Why do you see what you don't have? You have a team of like-minded people. You are surrounded by the best specialists in various fields. Don't worry about money. There are many options for realizing such projects. Just mentally accept that some very rich people are interested in supporting as many ideas like you as possible. Just mentally accept it, Harvey said and smiled. Anthony was now actively engaged in working out a plan for his case. His eyes were burning. He did not feel tired, and it seemed that gradually even his thinking had changed in another direction. There was less and less doubt in his abilities. After a couple of months of hard work, there were several people who were interested in Anthony's project. With each of them, Anthony had to go through long interviews. Each time, he became more confident. Eventually, one of these people agreed to become his partner in the realization of the new business. After a few months, Anthony headed to the clinic for an extended stay. During his absence, his friends and associates supported his business. From the clinic, Anthony returned a different person, leaving his wheelchair there. He walked into his office as if on his own two legs. It was true that the prosthesis still caused some inconvenience, but all this was surmountable. Anthony had a lot of important things ahead of him. He promised his fellow shelter members to make a device for each of them. Harvey's teammates were actively telling Anthony's story everywhere and anywhere. So, Anthony had amassed an impressive list of customers. He and his team could hardly keep up with the production of new fixtures. Already in the next phase, entire organizations and clinics were becoming his customers. Anthony had to expand his team as a matter of urgency, which was not difficult for him. One day, Anthony was sitting in a restaurant waiting for a man. He paid no attention to the people around him, occasionally talking on the phone and leafing through his reports. He didn't even notice that someone approached him and was about to call out to him, "Anthony, is that you?" Anthony raised his head and saw painfully familiar eyes in front of him. Forgotten with tremendous effort on his part, it was Selena. Anthony stood up from his seat, unable to find a phrase. "Do you mind if I sit down with you?" Selena smiled her usual radiant smile. "I see you've achieved your goal. I'm very happy for you." Anthony didn't want to talk about the past, but he was more than happy to talk about the future. He'd also like to talk about his current affairs. Of course, he was doing important work for others and developing a special business. Selena listened to him and never ceased to be amazed. But things didn't work out with Gob and me. He quickly joined the bottle, devoting all his time to his friends. My attempts to make things work didn't work out with him. That's why I had to leave him with his choice. But I have my son growing up. Selena showed her phone pictures of a 5-6-year-old boy. A few minutes later, a girl walked into the cafe and made her way to Anthony's table. He greeted her and introduced her. "Cecilia, I'd like you to meet Selena. We used to work at the same place. We just met by chance. Selena, this is my wife Cecilia." True, it was not Elizabeth's daughter. He met this Cecilia while he was running around implementing his plans. But that's a separate story. While Anthony was happy, in love and satisfied with his own person. These events took place over the course of 10 years. I had a truly accomplished man sitting in front of me. And I still can't forget the 20-year-old young man who, with pain in his eyes, asked passers-by about the secrets of success. That's just one story I witnessed in journalism. Anthony and I still talk occasionally. He and Cecilia have a beautiful family now. He continues to make strides in helping millions of disabled people make life easier.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.